Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today's Call for Code 2019 virtual hackathon live stream. I'm Daniel Crook. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the Call for Code competition, as well as the IBM Code and Response program that supports the ideas that are created by the Call for Code competition. So we've entered our second year of this. Very exciting to see how we're coming into the home stretch with lots of great ideas, lots of conversations, lots of demos I've already seen. So hopefully you can use today's live stream and the 24 hours of content after it to help you learn more about the technology you can use in the competition, as well as meet mentors who can help you use that technology. We've got a bunch of people on the Slack channel, and as well as meet teammates. So if you've been working on your own, perhaps you've been working on an idea, you can find some like-minded folks to build out that idea. So if you haven't already, if you haven't checked out the landing page, if you go to our developer.ibm.com/call-for-code page, you'll find the link to the virtual hackathon. So if you click through to that, you'll find a way to create. Oops, sorry, hold on a second. Got echo here. Okay. You'll find a way to create. Oops, sorry. All right, just fixing the echo. Oops, sorry. It sounds me like I got some feedback here. Yeah. Oh, you know what it is? I opened up this hackathon window. Okay, sorry about that. So it turns out if you open up that page while you're also presenting on it, you get a little Twitter loop there. So I won't click into the virtual hackathon page, but if you go there, you can find how to sign up for an IBM Cloud account, as well as how to find some resources you can use to build your application. And then there's also the schedule that's going to go over the 24 hours. So I'm kicking it off for the next half hour. And either on a half hour or an hourly basis, we'll have a different presenter on to introduce you to one aspect of the technology, or take a deep dive in a particular area, do a demo, and you can ask them questions in Slack, in the Twitch chat here, and hopefully we'll get you answers as quick as you can. Okay, so Call for Code. Some of you may have already heard some details, but it is a multi-year program. And this year, the focus is again on how do we address the threats of natural disasters and match those growing threats with the power of the growing number of developers out there. There's 23 million developers today. That number is going to grow, and lots of people who don't come from traditional software development backgrounds or computer science degrees, people with experience in project management, design, business analysts, all sorts of roles are coming together and being able to use technology to create some amazing solutions. So what we hope to do with Call for Code is to match that growing trend of natural disasters affecting people around the world with the growing power of developers and others that can use technology to help people prepare for them, respond to them, and recover from them. So the general overview is basically we're looking for any software, hardware, any technology solution that uses some IBM Cloud technology to provide a solution for an end user, perhaps the victim of a disaster, a local politician who's trying to plan and put some resources in place for their community based on information about how best to use it, to a small business owner who's trying to recover from a recent disaster and get back on their feet so that they can stay in business. So there's a pretty broad scope. We are adding a bit of an emphasis on health and well-being this year, which helps folks, for example, locate or access clean water and food, reducing the impact of the spread of diseases, helping vulnerable populations get access to the same types of resources to prepare for and respond to disasters too. So there's a whole bunch of potential use cases in this area. You can find a few of them here on this slide, and as well as some of the information online. We've got videos, we've got blogs, we've got code patterns, tutorials, all sorts of things that you can use to understand the domain and start building your solution. So this is the second year of Call for Code. We had a winner last year that we've taken through the full cycle of helping them create an application through helping them take it forward and give it a life of its own. So last year we had participation for 156 nations. It includes official states as well as communities around the world, self-identifying communities. 100,000 developers took part in Call for Code in one form or another, either at a live in-person event or on a live stream like this or in some other way. And they created a bunch of applications. Some they submitted to the competition, some won some local prizes, and we did events around the world. So there was cities, universities, and for those who weren't in particular live events, maybe a 24-hour hackathon on site somewhere, we ran virtual hackathons like this. And going beyond reaching developers, we want to raise the awareness of these important issues and the power developers have. So we engaged a whole set of celebrities, eminent folks like President Bill Clinton, to help share the message and do the judging of the applications, to bring real insight as to what makes a great application, what has the greatest potential to make an impact. And the applications we're looking for, we want them to have a life of their own, just like Project Owl's. So Project Owl won an award that had 5 aspects to it. Again, this year, the winner will also get these 5 prizes. So there's an amazing award that we present at an award event. There's a large cash prize. There's the potential for investment and mentorship to take your idea and give it the funding it needs. There's open source support from the Linux Foundation. They maintain some of the world's largest open source projects, and they have an excellent set of resources for marketing, for creating LLCs around startups related to your technology, and helping you create an open source community that includes all the tools you need to help sustain a community around what you're building. For example, how others can contribute, how the IP is handled by new contributors, how you can help foster an inclusive community through a code of conduct, things like that. And finally, closing the loop, at least on the first year winner, the other part, the final prize that Project Owl won was support from IBM's Corporate Service Corps team. Basically, a squad of experts of some of the highest performing IBMers were able to join the Project Owl team on the ground in Puerto Rico to pilot test their solution and help them prove it. So we concluded that about 3 months ago, the initial deployment in Puerto Rico, and Project Owl continues to do additional tests with our support. But this was as part of the prize and the motivation for building sustainable ideas that can make an impact. The IBM Code and Response program takes the ideas like Project Owl and puts that on the ground. So we connected them with resources in Puerto Rico from the public and private sectors to test out their solution on the ground where it might be deployed in the future during a real emergency. As part of that, we were able to connect them with the startup community. Engine 4 is one of the Project Owl supporting organizations. They're a co-working space, an IoT lab in Bayamon, Puerto Rico, just west of San Juan. And we were able to connect them with the Chief Innovation Officer and Chief Information Officer. She's one in the same role, Gloria Mar Ripoll, and demo for the governor of Puerto Rico, the Project Owl solution. You can find out more about Project Owl. There's a mini documentary that was created based on that experience, and we'll replay it on the live stream here too. We've got an associated YouTube playlist that we'll fill in during some of the live content. But if you look up Project Owl, project-owl.com, you can find that mini documentary as well. And so going even beyond the Project Owl Grand Prize winning team, we had participation last year from teams around the world. And they came to the competition with ways to address earthquakes, wildfires, connectivity, getting resources to people as needed. So lots of different ideas they brought to the table using some really cool IBM technology, as well as integrating those with third-party things such as the Sigfox IoT system and Android mobile phones. So lots of really inspiring ideas. And you can see more about those runners up at callforcode.org. You scroll down, there's a set of videos there describing their solution. So maybe that'll inspire what you build as well, and learn about the particular areas that they addressed, and maybe you can improve on. So what we are doing with Call for Code, Call for Code is not just an IBM initiative. In fact, it was started by DCC, a company that helps raise awareness around some of the large humanitarian issues that are out there, such as access to clean water and reducing the spread of diseases. So David Clark Cause, the United Nations Human Rights Office, the American Red Cross, and an ecosystem of other partners and sponsors and supporters are providing expertise on the real world disaster related issues that are out there that are potential areas where technology can make a difference. And so as IBM, what we have done is provided technology to meet those real world needs that you can use to create your call for code submission. So you can find these all at developer.ibm.com/call-for-code. And they help you look at the problem from a couple of the different dimensions. So if you're really interested in potential cutting edge technology first, you can look at 6 technology areas. That includes data science for helping do some analysis, maybe some risk assessments, predictions, artificial intelligence for doing real-time communications, translations, visual recognition, assessing where problems are, filing insurance claims, blockchain for creating secure financial networks. So accountability can be brought to, for example, the donation process. Traffic and weather information. The weather company, it's part of IBM. They've opened up many of their weather APIs to call for code participants. The Internet of Things, similar to what Owl built, taking little hardware devices and finding a way to arrange those and emit messages that they can send through the cloud to restore connectivity. And machine learning, so looking at existing models that are out there that can be improved and applied to help folks, for example, build back better with better information in the future. We also have a new dimension for specific industries. So if you come in from automotive or energy and utilities, fintech, healthcare, retail, telecommunications, if there's something that resonates with your expertise or your company, we've arranged some code patterns, some tutorials, some blogs, and things like that on that dimension as well. And if there's a particular disaster that you're most concerned with, for example, floods, if you're coming from India, for example, or earthquakes if you're in East Asia, wildfires if you're in the Western United States, you can look at some of the resources that lay down the sort of challenges that come from those particular disasters. And they could help you also shape your idea. And this being the central theme really for Call for Code this year is improving individual and community well-being. There's also a set of resources focused specifically around that. And finally, we have what was just created a couple of weeks ago during a summit at the United Nations Human Rights Office in Geneva, where we met with members of the UN HRO, but also the UN DRR, which is the Disaster Risk Reduction Organization. Those UN experts helped us frame 4 really pressing problem domains where if there were solutions created by technology for Call for Code, they could really make an impact. So these are very specific framings of the problem. And these teams in Geneva, developers from open source communities, from IBM, from some of our larger companies, customers, came together to propose a potential use case solution to each of these problems. You can use those as inspiration. They're logical architecture diagrams right now. They don't have code that backs them. So what we want is developers to take those starter kits, take a look, understand the problem, and then start to use that as the basis of their own submission. So we would love to see those fleshed out. And on this live stream, actually, pretty soon we'll have Georgia Diamantopoulou talk about one of these particular starter kits. She'll take you through that and some of the resources that are there. And we have folks from the other 4 teams that created those use cases on this stream later in the schedule as well. Okay, so once you've understood the problem, understood some of the technology, as you're assembling your application, keep in mind the end goal of the judging criteria. So this, if you keep these in mind, this will help you build something that's really going to have a great impact. It's going to impress the judges and improve your chances of winning the prizes. So we understand that in a few months, few weeks, it's hard to build a full production scale application. But the more complete the idea is, the better it's going to do. So working code, good instructions on how to set it up, framing it so that it clearly solves whatever local problem you're looking at, but also can be transferred perhaps to another one. So for example, if you're working for Puerto Rico on something that helps with hurricane response, you can take that and apply that possibly to monsoons or flooding in India and vice versa. That's another part of that is good documentation, talking about how it can be used, how it can be recreated, what a judge might use to spin it up for themselves. Efficiency and effectiveness. So that's really going to those starter kits and some of the expert materials, the videos that we have, interviews with subject matter experts. Is it really solving a problem? Is it helping address a really important area? And what we don't want to see is people just bringing technology to the competition that really is not practical and isn't really solving and defining what it's going to solve as its end goal. Design and usability, that's important for framing who's the end user of your software system. Is that a person who's under stress, that's the victim of a disaster, empathizing with how they're going to respond to technology? If they have a mobile app, will they have pre-installed it? Is it use SMS? How exactly it will improve their lives without adding undue complexity? Or for example, if you're creating something like a dashboard for an incident responder, understanding, is it going to fit into the toolbox of things they already use? How is it going to help them? And finally, creativity and innovation, which is a way, which is if you take a brand new solution to the problem and have just some either 10 time improvement on what's already out there, or you bring something really creative to the field. My favorite example of this is there was a team last year in Germany that looked at the monsoon in Sri Lanka in 2004, and they looked at some of the information about the national park there. It turned out that large animals that were in the national park, none of them were killed in the tsunami. And they were trying to figure out why this was, given the impact on so many human lives there. And they realized that the animals were in a national park with different elevations. So they started to move uphill and to safer ground before the storm. They clearly knew something that the humans couldn't sense. So this team built a system for imagining how to place trackers on large animals, see their change in geopositioning from one position to a next. Did that represent going up a topology? And therefore, if they did that, that was also a way to understand that there was an imminent risk. So really cool innovation. Unfortunately, it wasn't as complete. It was more of an idea, but they scored really well in that area. And it was really cool to see that. Okay, so some of the important rules. As you build applications here during the virtual hackathon and on through the competition, which the submission deadline is in July, we need you to build new applications. You can't bring to this competition something that you created years ago, some commercial product that's already in market. It had to have been created at the launch of Call for Code, which was actually in February 12th. You can see the date on the participation agreement. We opened up for submissions on March 29th. And so the submissions, they need to be fresh code. And if they use anything, as all modern applications do, such as dependencies on node modules, anything that they depend on, any UIs, any things such as core ML on the mobile device, they have to be available to everybody else. So if you had a module that you open sourced and it's, people know about it, that is okay to include as part of your application. But the core of what you build, it's got to be brand new for the competition. You can submit as one application as part of one team. During this virtual hackathon, during the time leading up to submissions, you can work on several ideas, perhaps collaborate with others. But when it comes down to submitting, you will only be associated with one application and one team. And if we see multiple submissions in there, we'll ask you which team you wanted to be associated with as your one and only team. And you have to use at least one IBM Cloud service or system. So there's a huge catalog of things in the IBM Cloud catalog. Many of them have long-lasting free tiers. There's lots of great information you can find in there. You can also integrate that with, for example, Google Maps or APIs in Android, Core ML, open source projects like Kubernetes. So it doesn't have to be a purely IBM solution. It can bring in lots of different multi-cloud or hybrid cloud type of approaches. And to take a look at what we're actually looking for you to prepare for that submission deadline, if you go to callforcode.org submit, that gives you information on the full rules, which is in the participation agreement. You can open up the submission form, take a look at it. You don't have to fill it out, kind of scroll through to understand. The FAQ there also describes what's included. So you'll need a team name, description, short description, what your solution does, full page, Word document or PDF, essentially describing what the problem you're solving and how you're approaching that, along with a roadmap that explains how mature you are, your submission is, and where you plan to go next, maybe over the next quarter or two. And you'll also need to include the GitHub repository and a demo video, 3-minute demo video. And feel free to submit if you submitted already, you wanted to get it in there before the deadline, you can submit again. You can't edit an existing submission, but if you submit another one through your team lead's email address, you can replace the submission that went in there. But also keep in mind that whatever you link to in terms of a source code repository, you can update that as well instead of having to go back and resubmit. Okay, some tips for kind of how you approach today and think about the applications you want to build. Understand the real world problems that are out there. Take some time to look at the problem domain of disaster response. Look at some of the videos that are out there. Look at some research, books like Digital Humanitarians that have talked about how technology was used in 2010 for the Haiti earthquake, for example. So do a little research, find out what exists already. And leading off that, understand that there's a bunch of tools that are in use already out in the world. This is a greenfield competition, but there's definitely other solutions out there that you can build upon. So there's data standards that come from the OASIS Standards Organization. There's existing APIs out there that you can build on. So to make the best new application, the most innovative thing, look at the world of tools that exist already, what's popularly used maybe by first responders in your area, whatever protocols they follow that maybe could be digitized, things like that. And when you do submit, and as you work through your application, it's always great to capture your thoughts and capture everything in a source code repository. This way you can iterate on your application, and it's also something that the judges can see in a roadmap. Ideally, have some automated builds, some quality checking, good documentation, good setup scripts, things like that. Very important for when you submit. And one of the great things for the judges, particularly those judges who are experts in disaster preparedness, who aren't necessarily technical, creating a video that talks about the problem, what you're trying to do, and demos it, that's going to go a long way with the judges. So start to think about how you would phrase your problem, the script you want to write about it, and it helps you also hone the specific area that you want to attack with your application. And when you do submit, just make sure everything's available to the judges. We had a lot of applications this last year that looked great, but they had a private GitHub repo, so the judges couldn't go evaluate their completeness, and therefore they didn't score well. It's just it's something we'll remind folks before the submission deadline too, but make sure your code and your video are available. We have an option for you to invite a GitHub handle as an outside collaborator. We'll give you some more details on that, but just as you're doing this, as soon as the deadline comes, you may want to iterate in private until that point, but once you submit, make sure to flip on all of the read bits for the judges. Okay, so I'm just about to wrap up, and I'm going to be handing it over to my colleague Vince to take you through some of the resources available to you. But in general, to take part in Call for Code, there's 4 steps. You join the community. That gets you an IBM Cloud account, an IBM ID. It gets you into the IBM Coder community for Call for Code. So you can work through some learning about the IBM technology, learning about expert points of view on disasters. You'll also get access to, there's a set of forums there. You can use the Slack community, of course. Start building your application, exploring those disaster areas, the tech areas, the industries, the starter kits. Ask questions in Slack of anybody who you might need to lean on. Many people are tagged with the IBM Mentor tag. And then when you're ready to go, prepare and submit that solution. So we look forward to seeing what you build, and we'll hopefully get use out of the next 23.5 hours to really form the core of your idea or bring it over the finish line. So thank you again. My name is Daniel Crook. You can find me in Slack, and enjoy the day. Okay, you have Vince. I know he was coming back from an appointment. I was watching the channel there, but and usually it's not an issue with the echo. I didn't like the page itself. Legit.
Hello, everybody. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay through the live stream here and see the screen. My name is Vince Brunson. I'm the program director at IBM. And, we're just getting the hackathon kicked off here. And I'm sure that a number of you are sitting out there. You've got a lot of great ideas, a lot of things that you've thought about that can help around call for code and some excellent solutions. And so we thought it might be very helpful for you. We've got IBM Developer, which is the program that I oversee here at IBM. And it's our developer website. The whole premise of this is for us to be able to have code, content, and community out there. Our code comes in a few different formats. We have code patterns, tutorials, maybe code snippets in articles and things like that, or in blogs. Ton of good information out there. A lot of great content with our articles on the latest technologies, how those technologies play into our IBM Cloud strategy and IBM Cloud overall. And then our community, which is through Slack channels and other means. So I just wanted to give everyone a quick tour. Hopefully what you'll see here will help you further your ideas, or maybe even spark some ideas. And if there's questions along the way, I'd like for this, we can make this as interactive if we want to. So don't be afraid to put some questions into the chat, and I will do my best to answer those as we go along. So let's go ahead and get started here. So first of all, IBM Developer, the URL is, hopefully as you can see in my bar here, is developer IBM.com. Again, lots of great stuff to help you get started coding on the IBM Cloud. One of the key features here that we see as we just get started is we've got a nice search bar here for you to go and just search the entire site, looking for all sorts of information or answers to questions or code that you can leverage to get started coding today. I'm just going to give you a quick tour, so this will just kind of be very, very informal almost, I guess I should say. So, we've got links here to some of our key technology areas, some of which you may very well be using in your solution. So you may want to explore those, and we'll go into these in more detail as we go through the walkthrough today. But one of the ones that you might leverage would be blockchain or containers in your solutions. In past solutions for call for code last year, these are some of the technologies that were used quite extensively, as well as IoT. So, and I'll kind of walk you through some of that as well. You might want to be interested in learning about how IBM can mentor call for code solutions. And so a good blog article here that you might want to check out. We've also recently did some work over in Geneva with the UN. And out of that work came 4 really interesting starter kits to get you started on your path to your solution. I think looking at the schedule, though, we're going to cover most, if not all, of these starter kits. In fact, I think right after I finish up here, Daniel Crook, who kicked off the session today, along with some of our other developer advocates and folks, are going to be walking through one of these. So that might be very interesting. It's something for you to tune in. So I won't dive into that now, but I certainly don't want to ruin their thunder. And then, the developer site is a great place just to kind of find out what's going on in the IBM developer community. And as you can see, we do things like put information out about how you can join in on us on hackathons, upcoming events, and so on and so forth. So just kind of a nice little area. As we scroll down through this main page, have a number of code patterns that you can dive into. A code pattern just is really a complete solution to problems or issues that we've seen very often out in industry. As as you are probably aware, IBM has a fairly large team of advocates that are out there helping folks get started on our IBM Cloud, talking about different technologies and so on and so forth, along with our GBS and GTS teams out there. And so when we see things that we think are helpful and useful to others around in the development community, we build a full solution for that. Many times, if you go down through it, there's as you look at the code and get the code, you can deploy these things directly to the IBM Cloud with one click. and you can actually be up and running in a matter of minutes. And we'll kind of take a closer look at one of those a little bit later as we walk through the walkthrough here. Go through the walkthrough. And then again, I talked about the fact that we have advocates literally around the world that can help you out. They do a number of different things. They have webcasts, they do hackathons, meetups, conferences, so on. So again, a really nice way here through all of our events calendar where you can see where advocates and IBMers are available to get in contact with in your area. And let's just jump in here and take a look at some of the events that are coming up. We'll look at the events calendar in more detail. It's nice that in the instance that you come out here and take a look, you can take a look at what's coming up. You can start to sort through by either technologies or maybe a particular industry that you're interested in. Certainly any of the deployment models, and so you get a good flavor for what we're doing and what the IBM developer community is out there talking about with our fellow developers. So let's take a step back and go back to the main page, and let's take a look at a particular code pattern, just to kind of give you a sense of what's going on. So some of you may be thinking about, well, how am I going to leverage a blockchain or some sort of a blockchain technology as part of what we're doing? So let's take a little bit of a more in-depth look at a particular code pattern that is using blockchain. So code patterns, every single code pattern that we look at is structured in the same way so that it's very familiar to you as you walk through and try to leverage and use a code pattern. We have a nice header here. Obviously, all of our code is freely available in GitHub. It's open source, so feel free to fork it, download it, use it any way you see fit. They all come with, I believe, the Apache 2.0 license. So again, very free, very unencumbered license that you can go and use this code and use it as a basis to start out one of your solutions. Many times we do things that we, after the code pattern is created, the developer that created the code pattern will do a session where they can actually walk through and show you how the code pattern was created, the thought behind it, and so on and so forth. And so a lot of times you can get some good insight to view the demo. One of the other things I want to point out is our developers that have created the code pattern, we have their a link to them here, so you can actually contact them directly, which is something that I haven't seen in many other developer sites across the industry. So again, our developers are there; they're there to help. So feel free to take a look at that and leverage them as well as you go through and work on things. Again, as we walk through a code pattern, we've got a short summary here. It kind of gives you the high-level overview of what this is about, a detailed description. We're not going to go into great detail here. One of the nice things about this is you can kind of get a high-level architectural overview through the flow diagrams that we have, and you can see all of the different bits and pieces that are of technology that are coming together to make this solution a reality. So we can quickly see here that we're using the IBM blockchain platform. We're using Node.js. We're also using the Kubernetes and the Hyperledger Fabric network. So very detailed flow diagram to give you a good idea of just what exactly is going on within this application. And then finally, probably what everybody's most interested in is the instructions with a link to the README. That README actually is on GitHub. So if we go back and take a quick look, if we click on this Get the Code and I open this link up in a new tab, you can see that we're quickly and easily taken to GitHub. Dismiss that to kind of make a better use of our space. So you can see the code is all out there, readily available. You can take a look at how often it's been forked, how many people have liked it, how many watchers. So you can see that this is a fairly popular code pattern with 314 forks. So a lot of people are out there taking a look at it, leveraging it, and using it. And then, this is just what all of us as developers are used to, right? We've got a lot of good information here as part of the README. Some of what you see in the code pattern is actually repeated. So, as developers, we often leverage Google as our first source of reference. And so sometimes we may come directly into the GitHub repo instead of coming through the actual code pattern page itself. So we try to make sure that you've got all the information you need. Again, the flow diagram. And then you eventually get down to where we can start watching the video that was referenced. Continue to scroll down. This is quite a long one, but you can then take the steps and start to walk through and get this deployed quickly and easily onto the IBM cloud with everything being very well laid out. So as you can see, it's a great way to get started quickly and easily with a particular technology, get it up and running, and get started and get on your way coding quickly and easily. One of the other things that I want to point out on a code pattern page itself is our left nav over here. So we can quickly and easily, you can take a look at different code patterns that you can jump to. We've got, we can get to our getting started, any announcements, articles. And the nice thing about this is we're already in the blockchain area. We understand that you're interested in blockchain. So if we are to click on the articles that you see are actually scoped to, already scoped to blockchain. So that's the information you're looking for. So we really work hard to make sure that we are getting you the information you want quickly and easily and in a timely fashion. So while we're here, let's just jump into a particular article and take a quick look. So let's just pick the very first one here. This is demystifying Hyperledger Fabric, right? Again, article, very similar layout to the code patterns. Have the author of this particular article here, who is also a developer advocate, so you can easily get in touch with them. If you want, if you have any questions about the article that they have in play. And in this particular article, we've got some prerequisites, so some other pre-reading that you may want to do before you take a look at this particular article. And then you can scroll down through and take a look at some of the different technologies and things that they're talking about as a part of this article. So again, yet just another way to learn about a particular technology quickly and easily. The thing that I like is that we have a quick access to the developers themselves to talk to them. And then the same way would be true, we're already in blockchain, so if I were to take a look at a tutorial, for example, and you might ask yourself, well, what's the difference between an article, a code pattern, and a tutorial? Well, a tutorial is generally something that is more focused on one particular part of technology, In this case, most likely, is blockchain. So let's take a look at this tutorial, which is step-by-step how to a basic blockchain network. Might be something that gets you started on your path with what you're doing for your particular solution or call for code. And again, very focused just on the blockchain platform. Again, as you continue to see, as we start to look through the different content types that are on IBM Developer, everything is laid out in much the same way, so that there's nothing surprising or shocking here. Again, a link to the author of the tutorial, kind of a brief overview here at the beginning, any prerequisites you might need, and then it just simply walks you through the steps. A bit much more simple flow diagram here as compared to the code pattern that we looked at earlier. Again, focusing on a particular technology and how to get started with that technology versus maybe a larger solution that is bringing together 3 or 4 or more technologies that go into creating that solution. And then very clear steps, very easily laid out exactly what you need to do to get going on the IBM cloud with the Kubernetes service, the blockchain platform, just continuing to walk through it. Very straightforward, very easy to do, and you should be able to get up and running quickly and easily in no time and learn more about what it's like to get blockchain started and get going on your particular solution. Let's see here. What else can we point out about IBM Developer? Go back to the main page here. Take a look here. Let's go take a look at all the technologies that you can dive into, because I think that there's some here, and I just want to point these out because these are all great places to get started and start learning about how to get your solution up and running or get started on your solution. As you can see, I'm just kind of based on last year's call for code. Again, blockchain was a big part of many of the solutions that we saw. A number of folks used containers, our AI services that are on the IBM cloud. Because as you know, as you start to take a look at a solution and build out a solution, you must use the IBM cloud services as part of your solution to be a valid entry into call for code contests. So make sure you take a look at these and leverage that. Node.js, again, was one of the big ones that we saw a lot. And then we can start to walk through, and you can kind of see the conversation one. That's the Watson conversation for building chatbots. That was a popular part of many of the solutions that we had the first call for code. Some deep learning, so machine learning and deep learning were also a big part of that. And then I think one of the biggest ones that we saw as well was many folks used IoT devices as part of their solution. So a whole bunch of knowledge here and sharing around IoT, mobile development, microservices, as just a whole wealth of opportunity here to be able to kind of leverage many of our different technologies and the good work that our IBM developer advocates have done in the field. And since we did see a lot of folks use IoT, let's just take a quick look here at some of what we've done and some of what's available in the IoT space. So, we take a look at this. Drones were a big part of what was done in the first Call for Code initiative. So, we can learn more about flying drones using React and Node.js. I think there's a lot of visual recognition and things in there. So certainly things you can take a look at. And again, just more featured articles, featured things of what some different folks have done. IBM recently ran a drone challenge where we were actually giving away 1,500 drones. That closed this past Sunday. But hopefully you were able to get in on that giveaway. So, we had some folks that did some really interesting things around that. So again, a number of different things that you can look at, tutorials, articles, videos, all available around IoT to get you started and get you going with IoT. And if you want to look at all the IoT code patterns, again, once you're in the IoT Technology Hub, which is what we're looking at here, we can click on the code patterns, open that link in a new tab, and now you can get into and you can start to dig through and see all of the cool IoT based code patterns that we have that will get you started and on your way. Let's take a look here. Anything that I'm missing around IBM Developer and what you might use it for across as you get started on your call for code opportunity. I don't think so. I think we've pretty much touched on everything. So I've got about 5 or 6 minutes here. I'm just going to give a real quick recap. So again, this is the home page for IBM Developer. We've got a nice little menu across the top. I can use this to kind of summarize what I've talked about. So again, a number of technologies that are all available. Any one of these technologies, if you click on them, will take you to a technology hub, which we just looked at for IoT. If you're interested in a particular deployment model, we've got our cloud, our hybrid, our offline, and you can take a look at all the different deployment models. And then finally, components. And I'm going to kind of point this out because I think a number of folks last year used Node-RED to prototype their applications. And so this is a good starting point for Node-RED, if you will. For those of you that don't know, Node-RED is a low-code, no-code coding platform. It's kind of hard to use a coding platform when you say it's low-code, no-code, but it is a coding platform. It's great for prototyping, getting things up and running. And over the last bit, it's actually become very robust, and people are starting to deploy this in their enterprise as well. So again, a good way to go and quickly try things. A number of the IBM Cloud services, especially if you go to the IBM Cloud itself and use the Node-RED instance that runs on the IBM Cloud, a number of the Watson services are already plugged in and available and ready for you to go use. So again, another great way for you to be able to very quickly and easily get up and running and prototype your solutions. In fact, one of the cool ones that we recently done, we'll take a look at this tutorial here, which is which might get you going, is programming a telodrome to take pictures and classify images. So again, using Node-RED, using IBM visual recognition, and so on, very quickly and easily can be able to use these to get yourself going. So with that, I've got about 4 minutes left. So I'm going to leave some time use the rest of that time for any questions that one might have. I don't think I've left anything out. Pretty simple, pretty easy. I think you'll see that things across the board are very similar, the way that everything is laid out, so that once you get to a particular technology or into a tutorial or a code pattern, it's very, very easy for you to understand and get to where you need and get going. So with that, I'll pause and take a second and see if there's any questions that have come in via chat or any other mechanism. Awesome. Yeah. Yep. Greg is one of our IoT gurus, and also happens to be my boss. So be sure to tune in for that. He's got all sorts of widgets and gadgets and things like that he does with IoT and Node-RED and all sorts of fun stuff. So certainly pick his brain and get some great ideas from him as well. So. All right then. Well, if there's no questions, we've come to the end of my half hour. I just want to wish everyone, the best of luck as you go and build out your solutions. Call for Code is an amazing opportunity for folks to use IBM technologies and just technology in general. It doesn't even, IBM technologies obviously are a big part of this, but just using technologies in general to make a difference in the world and in society through helping folks either prepare for or recover after natural disasters. So I wish you all the best. And if there's anything that you need from me, I think all my information is displayed out there. So feel free to either send me a message on Twitter or via email or whatever mechanism that you wish to send, and I'll be happy to do whatever I can to lend a hand and mentor and help out. With that, I'll bring it to a close. So thank you, everyone, and again, best of luck.
Okay, welcome to the second hour of our Call for Code virtual hackathon. So we're going to talk today about one of the starter kits. So we had 2 weeks ago, we convened a group of experts in Switzerland to create a set of starter architecture diagrams for addressing some of the world's largest problems. So there were 4 challenges that 4 teams in Switzerland addressed. My colleague here, Georgia Diamantopoulos, she was
Hello.
on one of the teams, and she's going to take you through her particular challenge architecture. But Georgia, if you could just scroll through this page for a second, we can talk just quickly about the 4. Okay, so challenge 1 was building back better. This was how to respond more quickly from a disaster. Challenge 2 was how do you deal with too much water or too little water? What sorts of things can you do to prepare for those situations? If you scroll down, Georgia, to challenge 3. Challenge 3 was about making sure that human rights didn't take a backseat to recovery after a storm, to ensure that while everybody's responding to the storm, that all rights are respected. And finally, in challenge 4, we looked at how vulnerable communities could be helped along with the general population of, for example, fully mobile people after a storm. So imagine the elderly or those without access to smartphones, things like that. So these are the 4 problem areas. They're areas where we help people develop solutions. And the starter kits are one potential way to address the solution. So Georgia, I'll hand it over to you to talk about your experience understanding the problem and building it out when you were in Geneva.
Yeah, and thanks a lot for this opportunity, because it was like magic to work with so many people from different countries, different companies, and have a common goal that is a humanistic goal: make solutions for a better world for all. And as Daniel has said before, we were working in Challenge 2, improving flood and drought prevention and response. So if you all click also into that challenge, you can see some details, like what was the challenge, why is this needed. From our perspective, me and my team's perspective, it was a real challenge indeed. And we thought that we should put all of our effort in order to help humanity in that direction, and build a starter kit for the developers in order to take this and go and go it into a further step. So regarding our challenge, there is a lot of information available before and during disasters. As we also heard from the United Nations representatives, but what was amazing is that it does not fully reach the potential to help the survivors. Although there has been an increased search for mapping geodata, this data only includes general risks and does not incorporate exposure and the vulnerability of the victims. This is because the information is not personal and relevant. So that was the first thing that we figured out. So we ended up with a holistic solution, taking into consideration the personas that are involved in such a disaster. So I will share my screen now and show you our presentation. Just give me a minute to change the share. I think that you can see my our presentation right now.
Yep.
This was.
Do you want to full screen it a bit, or
yes, of course. So this was our team: Julian, David, Paul, and John. And as you can see, we were very bonded together through this today's workshop. One picture is like thousands of words, and we were very also felt very emotional when we saw pictures from floods, and that helped us in order to build the personas in the first place. So we have the victim, that is a mother with children. We have the rescuer that feels very accountable for his role, and we have also the governance part. So we started with 3 personas and made our best in order to be in their position, be in their shoes, and just wrote down their emotions and how they were feeling, what they were thinking, and during the disaster, because it's very important in order to build a solution to know for who you are building the solutions in order to have matter. After that, we made a solution map, and we ended up with, as I said, a holistic approach. You can see here that we had the before, the during, and the recovery. And we had also the personas and tried to find solutions for each step and each persona. At the end, we ended up with 2 functionalities. The one was a mobile app for the survivors, for the victims. And before the disaster, we suggested a personal training program with gamification in order to incentivize the potential survivors to find and prepare a personalized escape route. This gives them the feeling of being in control. And during the training program, the personalized needs and tasks are opted in. So we provide personal insights and advice, and also that would help the first responders to address the needs of the survivor. This application can function also as a communication channel between survivors and responders. And the solution will be put the survivor at the heart of the rescue operation. We also mapped a solution architecture with several cutting-edge technologies. And we also we also had a deep discovery into the IBM cloud services that could help into building a kind of mobile application. The potential is huge. IBM has cutting-edge technologies that all the developers should have a look into and use them for their solutions. But not only regarding the rescuers, we also focused on the governance part. We had the persona Mayor Maria, and we ended up also with our second solution, that is a flood disaster planner, like a dashboard where the planner, the governance and mayor, however, from the governance part can pull valuable data from the survivors, like location, risk exposure, area cost benefit, and coordinate in that way the teams in a flexible manner. So big data visualization sits at the core of our solution, and we enable the planner to take informed decisions during the disaster. So given the data collected from the survivor, the planner can prioritize the teams and focus on the most vulnerable people, sending out notifications to the survivor. Our planner solution architecture looks like the one that you see on your screen, and also some IBM cloud services possible solutions like the Watson Studio, the Watson Machine Learning, Weather APIs, and Slack APIs. We had also some recommended resources that helped us evaluate what could be the data that would fit also this dashboard. Yeah, and I don't know if we can hear any question.
Yeah, well, why don't we switch over to the web browser so people can find under the starters area where they can find details on more details on the solution you built, and then we can check some questions. Okay. If you exit out of full screen,
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I'm looking in the chat, see if there's any questions. Yeah, go over to the starter page, the different tab here.
To the starter page, okay.
Yeah, and in fact, you can get to there directly from the navigation. See the call for code resources. The call for code resources tab up top in the masthead. See up there on the navigation. There's under the resources, you'll see the 4 solution kits. So see the navigation there you go, under resources. Can you click resources, Georgia?
Yes.
It's in the top there. Yeah, right underneath the IBM logo. See the resources drop down?
Yes, I saw.
There you go. So yeah, so you can see all 4 solution starter kits are there. And the one that Georgia's team worked on, a bunch of, I forgot to mention too, she's from Deutsche Telekom. She worked with some folks from IBM, from the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. I'm sorry, from other organizations like RBS as well in her team to propose a solution. So if you click through to that, Georgia, developers can learn more about the solution that Georgia presented and check out a video from one of her team members here from Capgemini talking about the solution as well from a different point of view. And below, you'll see the outcome of understanding the empathy map of the first responder, of the victim themselves, and some potential architecture diagrams to implement the solution, some steps on how you might build this application out, and then the resources that Georgia's team identified are all available at the bottom too. So there are some code patterns you can use as your starting point for building a solution in this area. There's data sets they discovered, as well as some documentation from the United Nations as well. Good. Okay, so I don't see any questions right now. But if you do have any questions about starter kits, we've got the Slack channel. You can ping those in there, and we'll help you get those answered. And so these starter kits too, we hope to see them evolve. So they'll include more details. For example, the empathy maps that Georgia showed will be included here. And then if there's any folks that IBM developer advocates or anybody else has been working on to maybe build out some of the modules or components there, we'll have those available in an associated GitHub repository. So definitely check back for them, and they're going to be available under the resources menu from any call for code page. So Georgia, thank you very much again. I still see
I thank you very much for the opportunity, and I will be very glad if anyone wants to reach me out and ask me anything, not only regarding the experience, but also any insight from your part or the United Nations part. And thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Georgia. Have a great day.
You too. Bye, everyone.
Hey everybody, my name's Derek TA. I'm a developer advocate for IBM, and I just kind of wanted to go through some additional resources that we have for you on call for code and code and response. I'm sure you're familiar by now, but developer.ibm.com/call for code brings you to this page here. If you have not already signed up for an IBM Cloud account, this would be the place to do it. So all you have to do is click here and where it says accept the call for code challenge. You'll punch in your information here and you'll get an email. So I've already done this just to kind of save some time. So you'll punch in your information, you'll go to your email, you'll get an email from IBM asking you to confirm your account. So all you have to do, confirm your account. Doing this live, so hopefully this is good. Okay, good. So we've confirmed our account. So this will then take you through to IBM Coder. And so IBM Coder has some challenges and things available for you to check out as it relates to call for code. Let me sign in with this, this here. Bear with me a second. All right, well, we'll use this account. So IBM, you'll typically get a pop-up that will ask you to accept the terms and conditions for using IBM Cloud, as well as using IBM Coder with some information to fill out a profile, which will eventually take you to this. So you can go through these challenges to kind of learn a little bit more about call for code. So it's pretty simple. You can just follow along through these things. It'll tell you where to start, to understand the challenge, go through, you can watch Willie's video, and kind of go through these and earn some points after you complete each of these challenges. This is a good step to start with because it will introduce you to the 2019 Call for Code Challenge. If you're not familiar with it, you can learn a little bit about what happened with the winners from 2018, Project Owl, learn more about what they were doing, as well as learn about the documentary, learn more about the cloud, some instructions for visual recognition. There's a lot of really good content in here for you to kind of get started with this and jumpstart into your call for code journey. So I would encourage you to go through this program here on IBM Coder and go through these individual challenges and make sure that you kind of understand where to start with this challenge and what it's all about and how you can really hop right into doing that. Once you've gone through here, there's a lot of resources that we have on both the Call for Code and the Code and Response websites. So we'll talk about the Call for Code one first. Both of these sites do have shared resources. So if you hover over the resources tab here in the menu bar, you'll see some resources here. So if you click on health and well-being, this will go through and give you information on just either general information or specific category information like food and water safety, supply distribution. These are all resources with various content in them. So if you're interested in the logistics behind healthcare during a disaster, clicking on this would take you to an entire research article about it. But there's also things like videos on supply distribution, tutorials, and code patterns that give you some more information on that. So there's a lot of information here, and you'll see it's laid out very similarly for all of these areas, but they're all broken down individually and they're all pretty specific. So another solution, another section here is technology. And so we have the 6 main technology focus areas for call for code: AI, or artificial intelligence, blockchain, data science, Internet of Things, machine learning, and traffic and weather. So you'll see if you click on any of these technology areas, again, very similarly laid out, where you'll have code patterns. So if you're unfamiliar with code patterns are kind of a jump start into
you just got another one too.
IBM Cloud technology with things that are already configured or have a pretty, in some instances broad, or in some instances really specific set of technologies or an idea to help you build things and kind of get an idea. So for example, if we look at this, we're under AI, and we want to look at assembling a pizza ordering chatbot, right? Not necessarily applicable to call for code. However, the technology and stuff in here can be repurposed to do things with bots. So maybe you do something a little more useful with a natural disaster other than ordering a pizza, right? But this will have a summary for you that kind of talks about what this code pattern is. It'll give you a little bit more detail in the description as far as how all of these things work together in this code pattern. And then you'll see the architectural diagram. This one is pretty simple as far as how this works, and it'll show you how all these components interact together. And you can find all of this in GitHub. So if you click, for example, here on this README, you'll have all of the information here as far as, you have a video on how this all works, the steps to deploy it. Most of these code patterns have a button to deploy the solution directly to IBM Cloud, or in this instance, you can run this particular example on a container or run it locally, with all the steps on how to do all of this, step by step, very specific, very detailed, a lot of information to get you started. So the code patterns are very, very usable for call for code. Again, some are relevant immediately to call for code. Some are still relevant from a technology perspective, but just with the purpose of it could be redone to be something a little bit more specific to call for code. So you'll find this in any of these code patterns. So if we hop back here, and same thing if we wanted to look at intelligent searches on data, right? Same thing. See a summary, a description, lots of information, architectural diagram, everything there. So I would encourage you guys to take a look at these code patterns. They are very helpful in helping you jumpstart on your call for code journey. You also have down here tutorials, which sometimes are similar to code patterns, but they can be different. So for example, if we look at setting up a chatbot and deploying it into IBM Cloud, again, you'll see it looks similar. It's just these are laid out a little bit differently, but you'll still have the same basic idea of the code pattern, and this will walk you through this stuff, similar like what you saw on GitHub with the previous example, step-by-step instructions. So I'm not going to go through each of these, but you can see that this is pretty detailed and should have all the information that you're looking for there. Also for each of these sections are tech talks. So if you were interested, again, we're still in AI, let's look at something different. Let's look at like blockchain. And we'll see tech talks here. So if you wanted to see about building a secure, resilient, traceable, and transparent supply networks with blockchain from my coworker Oliver, you can click here and watch this, and this will be an actual video on what's going on. So this is a 35-minute video on blockchain. So if you prefer to learn a little bit more that way, or if you just want to watch a video to get a better idea instead of going through the steps that I showed you before with code patterns and tutorials, you can do that as well. Again, these sections are in all of these resource areas. Additionally, you'll have blogs and some articles for things. This is one I happen to have written on building call for code apps using blockchain. So you can go through here and read a little bit about it as well with some more information and more resources. So really, however you learn best, you can find here on these pages, whether it's, step-by-step with detailed instructions, or if you're a visual learner or you just want to read stuff. I mean, lots of options here for you as well. Videos, again, some of these will overlap because we have embedded into these tutorials sometimes these videos, but again, sometimes these are different resources. So this one in particular, a cellular IoT asset tracker, which is great. So you'll find that there as well. And all of these pages will also have the reference architecture. So if you want to understand in very in-depth technical detail how a particular technology works, you can hop over to this page and it will show you the reference architecture for all of these things. So again, super detailed, lots of information. And you'll find the same. So if we looked at the automotive resources, we'd have the same thing here on, if you want to build a blockchain insurance app, we have the same thing here, code pattern for that as well, with the reference architectures for AI and IoT. Same thing here as we showed you before. Also, you can look at particular disasters. So if you're interested in, extreme weather, there's more resources here as well. This one's broken into two different sections. Understanding the problem caused by extreme weather. So these can all be, these can be videos or data sets or research. And then a section for creating solutions to help communities deal with this particular disaster, which would be extreme weather. This one happens to be a code pattern about that. So that's something that you can also take a look at there. And if you want to see all of these resources, all at once. You can click all resources here. Just another way to kind of see this. You can take a look at some of these solution starters, which I didn't cover yet. You can also find that in the drop down here. But if you're interested in, building back better, for these solution starter kits, you can take a look here. This kind of gives you, again, an overview, an idea kind of how this thing all meshes together with an architectural diagram. Hopefully you're seeing a pattern here where we like to give you as much information as we can, both technical and non-technical, with a lot of resources to be able to do these things. So you'll see all of that here as well. But all these resources are here for you to go through and find exactly what it is you're looking for, whether it's a particular resource area you're interested in or a particular type of disaster, type that interests you, whatever that would be, you can find all of that here. If you're interested in the code and response part of Call for Code, you can read about that here on developer.ibm.com/code and response. This is more about the, what we do, like for example, with Project Owl and helping them implement their solution. They were our winners last year in 2018. You can find a little bit more about our code and response initiative here as well. You'll also find the same resources here as well. So these are the same things. So however you want to access them, you can. But I think that should be a good amount of information to kind of get you started with everything here. If you have any other further questions, please reach out in the Slack channel, or if you you're welcome to message me directly. If you'd like, you can find me on Twitter or Slack, or any platform. You're welcome to do that. I think I think we've gone through pretty much everything here. So if you have any other further questions, please feel free to reach out, let us know, and make sure you take use of these resources that we've given you here, because it will definitely help you on your journey to creating a successful Call for Code application. So thank you for your time. Please reach out if you need any help. Thanks, guys.
When a natural disaster strikes, what we have observed on the ground is that marginalized populations, like elderly, like people living with disabilities, people who are living in very remote locations, it's difficult to touch them, to actually get the aid response to them. It's really important when you look at a humanitarian response to take into account these difficulties, so this response is as, let's say, inclusive as possible.
The solution that our team has come up with is a mobile application that allows us to automatically verify vulnerable people, people with limited mobility. So this is elderly people or disabled people, perhaps people who have children and they can't easily move in the case of an emergency. Connect them to evacuation teams in the case of needing to be evacuated, and give them the information and allow them to consent to an evacuation, and then to connect with their family and be reunified with their family once they enter a shelter. The focus on a population that is not well served, but their human rights need to be respected, especially in a case of a disaster, that is very personally satisfying to work on and to come up with a technological solution that can improve and save people's lives.
So there's of course a range of human rights violations that we see in after a crisis, which range from violations of the right to life, people are killed or injured, but also of course violation of the right to health, violation of the right to education. You cannot go to schools, schools are closed, the civilian infrastructures are destroyed or damaged. Violation of the right to housing, right to water and sanitation, so what we call the economic and social and cultural rights, which are violated in the course of a humanitarian crisis and after.
So I grew up in Pakistan and I saw a lot of political and sectarian violence. So we thought about the most vulnerable people, sort of stuck in a humanitarian crisis, and we want to be able to give them a voice that's confidential and safe, so that UN can actually use that data to be able to bring certain perpetrators to justice, as well as, sort of use the same kind of collective voice as a social facilitation, feeding back into the communities to encourage other people to speak up as well.
Our solution will basically make sure that that's encrypted and secure, non-identifiable to a broader audience, but feeds into a back-end system in the UN where they can have automated systems that scan for, issues like human rights abuses, patterns, trends, location trends, and so on. But with the nice addition of taking the anonymized data and turning that into potentially global stories that people can actually relate to and read and so on.
You're doing things for people that haven't got the skill set or the voice or, even the platforms or the environment to be able to do anything. So to be able to help them try to normalize their lives, yes, it feels good.
When you see somebody who is throwing a bag of rice out of a helicopter or responding to an emergency in a very dramatic way, it means that a number of failures have happened of governance and of planning and of listening to warnings and of thinking ahead. Flood risk in particular is challenging. What is almost certain is that the frequency is becoming more difficult to anticipate and the timing is becoming more difficult to anticipate. Droughts are even more complicated because there are many different kinds of droughts. The drivers of droughts can be climatological, they can be market focused, they can be political. The ways that you anticipate drought are not probabilistic in the same way that other hazards are. But I think from a family perspective or a community perspective, one of the biggest challenges is the knock-on effects. Damage to crops or damage to property, which then has results for the livelihood of the family in question. Then they have to sell their cow because they can't afford to this. In some countries, they use schools or hospitals as displacement centers, which means that then education can't happen for that period of time. So these knock-on effects actually have much more cost to the communities than we have ever properly calculated.
Our focus is always on the human. We have to feel their emotions in the time of a disaster, how they would feel, what's their anxieties. And we ended up with a mobile app solution that would guide them through such a disaster on finding the right shelters, the right information they would need in real time.
That after the disaster can get the aftercare and the help they needed. And at the same time, all this personal information we can provide back to the planners and to the first responders. The challenge is to get all these data sources and a whole bunch of AI and Watson tools that we identified and get them together into this platform.
Building back better is trying to take into consideration the context of the event, whether it's an earthquake or a flood or any other kind of disaster, and put the community back into a position where they're more likely to succeed. To put them on a path where their ability to reduce their risk factors is better.
Our Building Back Better solution is to empower both local municipalities, small business owners, or otherwise less capable victims to have a better feedback loop going forward in the future. How do we know the next flood, the next drought is going to be better handled? Have a way to get information faster or send back information faster. How we're approaching it is going to be a collection of some cloud native type infrastructure as well as some data set and modeling information. So a lot of it is event driven, data driven, and then intelligence modeling like Watson Studio and AI pieces of it to model that of like what kind of information has changed, even down to detecting from this image to this image, is that just damage or is that complete destroy? This kind of triggering of information so that they can find hotspots faster, dispatch help faster. The role of a lot of these open source technologies is the capability to take that approach to many different places, whether it's IBM's cloud or any of the other cloud providers. Kubernetes is largely the API now. So deploying these applications, being able to scale them out. Some of these might be getting creative with open technologies that were maybe slightly intended for something else. And these open technologies are extendable that way. You can put your hands in and get involved with it, not just use it in a single prescribed way.
All right, hi everybody. My name is Kevin Allen. I'm one of the content leads for Call for Code and Code and Response. My official IBM title is Program Director for Content, IBM Developer. But I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about some of the content resources that we have available. And so if you if you look at the developer.ibm.com/code and response site, you'll see a lot of great content resources that the entire team has spent a long time building and curating. So we have a variety of technology areas that we focus on, and this is all under the resources tab here. And then we also have some great healthcare related content. So there was an added emphasis this year for Call for Code on healthcare. So we created a lot of great content to help you understand what some of the problems are that people face when they're in a natural disaster scenario, in the during and the after, really. And then, some ideas on how to solve that, and some priorities that healthcare workers and first responders have when they're in the field, in terms of, this is what we need, this is what where technology can come in and play a role. So again, that link is developer.ibm.com/code and response. And then these resources, we have them broken out by technology areas. We also have what we call solution starters, which are basically frameworks for ideas that we came up with. And I know some people will be on a little later today to talk through those 4 solution starters and how to take those and really make them yours. So again, we've broken it out by technology area. So we have AI, blockchain, data science, Internet of Things, machine learning, traffic and weather. We also broke it out by industry, and then disaster area as well. So you can understand what happens in an earthquake, understand what happens in a hurricane, understand what happens in extreme weather, and what those challenges are that first responders and victims face. And then some of the ways that technology can come in, play a role, and solve for those problems. One of the signature pieces of content that we built is something that we're all very proud of here, which was we followed Project Owl, last year's winner, during a week that they were in Puerto Rico in March, doing their first deployment of the Owl network and over a large geographical area. And so we embedded with the team, and we had the opportunity to follow them and follow their successes, follow their failures, and follow just really follow their journey in that first area. So what we came up with is a mini documentary. It's about 20 minutes long. It's called the Project Owl Pilot, Puerto Rico. And it really follows them from winning the competition into continuing to build out their solution, and then actually getting into Puerto Rico and that deployment, and the partnership that they have with the IBM Corporate Service Corps, some of the IBM leaders that you'll see that you might have already seen on the live stream today. And it's really just it's more than just it's a developer story, but it's also really cool because I think it's a startup story. These are you're talking about a team that really they didn't all know each other coming into the competition. They met some of their team members on Slack through the competition, and then formed a team that way. And so I think the first time they were all in the same room together was at the awards ceremony in San Francisco last October. So I think it's a pretty cool story. You see kind of some of the team dynamics and that sort of thing. So right now I'm going to ask Mia if she'll go ahead and play the mini doc, and I'll come on afterward and answer any questions that anybody might have.
The last digits are 3, Bravo 6, 3.
Okay, test report received. 50% success rate.
We only sent 2 messages, so that's 100%. We reset it.
Oh, you just got another one too.
New message received.
You're standing at kilometer marker 6.6, which means that the range is 200 meters.
We are about 50 meters behind us.
right, the moment we've all been waiting for. The winner of the 2018 Call for Code Global Prize is Project Owl.
I would call this a moment of exponential impact. What we're going to do is address some of the world's toughest challenges. The first one is how to respond to natural disasters. We believe it's the largest initiative of its kind. It's something called Call for Code. IBM's committing to take those solutions, the things that you build, and we will deploy them around the world.
I know I speak for all these gentlemen up here that I just really can't wait to get home so we can get back to work on the technology and solutions for the people that need it most. Thank you so much.
La Isla del Cordero. It means Island of the Lamb. Most people, they want to believe that it was not going to hit us. But the night before, we knew it was already on us. During the hurricane, I was helping at 911 center. 911 never lost connectivity, but we weren't able to communicate with the rest of the agencies because they lost connectivity. The antennas had power generators and batteries, but when the power generator ran out of fuel and the battery died, you have an antenna that does not work. Because of all the destruction, the trees, the roads that were closed, it was really difficult to get them fuel. The type of communication that's going to help you is a solution that you can easily let people know what you need, how you're doing, how's your family, what do you need for the first responders to help you or to bring to your community.
I could sit in the nest. Winning the Call for Code was such an empowering experience. Not just for myself, but my team. The night we had won, we were all sitting in a room together and we said, we're gonna go to Puerto Rico this spring. And we started telling people that the next week and here we are. This was the clearest ground zero for a place that needed our technology. In the worst disasters, like Hurricane Maria, these are typically the events where connectivity infrastructure is most likely to be offline. How do you leverage a sophisticated software system when you have no electricity or internet to do it? We created these little IoT devices called ducts. We turn on these ducts, we put them in an area, and then you can open your phone, connect to the Wi-Fi network that they create, and start talking to others on the network.
What Owl is trying to do with this quickly deployed network is to establish not 100% connectivity, but just bring it from 0 to 1%, which is a huge difference to just get who needs what in a particular community.
A solution like Owl definitely could come in handy in an emergency like the one we had. There are other hardware and software solutions, but this combination of both, it's what makes it different and powerful.
What it takes to actually get Project Owl out there is we need some type of support and help from people who can show us a little bit of a path forward. And for us, that partner is IBM.
Through our Code and Response program, and we're helping Project Owl implement their solution as part of the award for having won the Call for Code competition. We have 5 Project Owl members, 5 IBMers, and as part of that, we also engage implementation partners like IT Disaster Resource Center. They provided their expertise, as well as co-working spaces here like Engine 4. We see Code and Response as taking these ideas and helping to make them real.
Hi, how are you? Initially, if all you can do is an absolute emergency, you can only send the SOS button, then you press the SOS. Go ahead. It's hard to sometimes envision what happened here in Puerto Rico. You have to envision a place that had no electricity, no access to roads,
no telecoms. It's a unique opportunity to save people's lives, to get them items of basic needs.
This afternoon we're heading to Punta Santiago, so we're going to go into the coastal region, drop a bunch of these ducks, and then start seeing dots and communications pop up on our map.
Puerto Rico, I think it's the appropriate place to test it because we've gone through it. As governor, I thank you, and as a former scientist, I am geekily excited about what you're doing over here.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This area got heavily impacted from the hurricane. The sand from the beach got all the way down to the roads. It was a lot of trouble. So this will be like the last location.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna stop right here, and then
we're going back.
Then we're going back.
Puerto Rico is really ideal because we have so many different landscapes in such a small place. Having something like this makes it so much easier to get a lay of the areas we're going to go into. You have mountains, plains, coastlines, rainforests, urban populations, and rural populations, which creates a unique challenge to put a network on the ground, especially if you're doing this quickly and in an ad hoc fashion.
We're going to be going up this road to deploy mama ducks every 500 meters. We're going to test to see if we send a message that it will be able to make it all the way back to the papa duck.
Papa online.
We have this architecture of duck links, mama ducks, papa ducks. Every piece of hardware is the same. The difference between each duck is we write a little bit different code and they communicate in a little bit of different ways to each other. This helps us ensure the function of the network.
So hopefully with this one we should see 100% success when the test report comes.
Yep.
So
Awesome.
Third message.
This particular test going on here is, can we get a transmission over long range? If we can prove we can do that over a dozen mamas, we're confident we could go from 12 mamas to 20 mamas or 50 mamas. And if we can do that, then we can go from 1 square mile to 10 to potentially 100.
Papa Duck, can you confirm that you received the last message sent?
Location 6 received.
Okay, got it.
Perfect. We've just stuck the duck onto the kilometer marker. We are moving to the next 200-meter location.
There is a lot of humidity in the air, which affects radio frequencies, and also a lot of the buildings here are made out of concrete. So this is probably one of the most difficult areas to do testing with radio frequency technologies.
You need to go grab some Velcro to stick them on some trees. Ducks and trees, who knew?
We developed an app specifically to test if we're connected to the network. You would just press a button, send SOS, message was sent successfully. You can see on screen right here the message ID. There on Derek's phone, we can see that we received the message.
Down in the road there is no cell phone reception. We can't get any messages from the cell phone, but we are getting messages through the ducks.
So this is an interesting application of unintended success of the network. Cell signal does not exist in parts of an area that are being serviced by our network right now.
So it's working?
So it's working.
High five, that was awesome.
Yeah, that was awesome. Hey. Conclusion of the first official field test in Yones. We did a total of 13 ducks.
Total of 13 ducks,
2.5 kilometers. There was a lot of traffic as well as rain and a lot of humidity. Not the greatest altitude in some hills. There were some issues with the range between the ducks. We'll have to figure out how to optimize that. I think ultimately these boards aren't a final solution. Taking 100 different challenges here to make this network real and to narrow it down to the 2 or 3 key ones, that's what these field tests are really all about.
Overall, very exciting and looking forward to our next test tomorrow.
Yeah, and we couldn't have done this without IBM and the Corporate Service Corps. It would have been a real cluster duck if we didn't have them.
The Corporate Service Corps is a 10-year program that IBM has already been part of. We selected some folks who volunteered for the program with a deep background in user experience, hardware, software, and community building. And so once we got on ground, everybody was very excited to take part of this, but they weren't quite sure what to expect.
None of the team had met in person before, so everyone knew each other from either Slack or just from the name on a piece of paper, someone's qualifications. So the initial challenge was meeting everyone, getting everyone together, getting everyone on the same page.
The CSC people kind of came in and were like, well, what do we do? We're not sure what's going on. It was really up to each individual to kind of define their role and find their niche within the group and figure out where they could best add value to the entire project.
Our personalities really all fit pretty well, I think. I think the Project Owl team was really cool with all the IBMers. IBMers were really cool with the Project Owl team. That was the initial challenge, to get everyone on the same page, especially technically, because we wanted to make sure that we were playing the right role for Owl, and we wanted to make sure that Owl was happy with the role that we were playing.
Corporate Service Corps, it's really hands-on experience, it's pro bono. You get to make a tangible difference in the lives of people all over the world.
It was an absolute pleasure to go to the Boys and Girls Club and get an age of users that we don't normally get to test.
The kids just figured out how to connect to the Wi-Fi network. We just asked them, can you find the Mama Duck Wi-Fi? And they just did. I think they know it better than we do.
I am a Hurricane Katrina survivor. I'm from New Orleans, born and raised. My family lost everything in Katrina. I can look at the things that happened to me and my family 14 years ago and the things that happened to the citizens of Puerto Rico 2 years ago, and I am Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is me. I know what it's like to be forgotten. I know what it's like to think that it's hopeless. I know what it's like to lose everything that you have. I never want somebody else to feel like that, so I will always give back. That's why being here in Puerto Rico, doing all this work means so much to me.
When I heard about the solution, I felt in love with it. I said I had to be part of the team, but they still have some challenges they need to solve. By building a mesh network, we need to maintain solid network from the duck links, from the mobile phones, back to the Owl cloud.
You can only go so far using radio communications. I think their challenge is going to be finding the right spacing of their nodes in various different, environments. They had great success yesterday. Where they're at today, we'll see. They may learn some lessons and some modifications they may need to do.
Ria, come in.
Team Alpha, come in.
Okay, 10. Sticking on 10. You guys should go as well. Stop deploying some others.
There we go, it's not going anywhere now.
We're having a couple issues with the mamas on the ground talking to the papa duck. If there's a mama 100 yards away and she's trying to transmit and the papa's struggling, what we can do is hoist another mama duck up high. Altitude is a huge advantage in radio frequency. She'll hear that message and then from there relay it to the papa duck. This is the one that's connected to the cloud, so this is the most important duck in the system right now.
Yeah, it's like a cell tower without all the expensive construction.
Yeah, costs like $50. That tower probably costs $50,000.
This is a temporary solution, so a temporary tower, if you will.
The way the mesh network's architected, it doesn't matter if we add one mama or if there are 10 mamas there. As long as someone can hear it and whack it, they can keep the message going along.
Well, they're definitely going to be getting better reception off of that.
The goal today is to get a circular loop deployed all the way kind of around this peninsula here. So they're going to be following this road round. So as they come around here, they'll have a direct line of sight connection with our Papa Duck. The deployment team is currently on this road down here. We can see the live location coming through on the map.
This pole's about to be 150 meters.
Let's just test here. Alpha, did you get number 6?
Number 6 not received yet.
So we got 19 messages out of 51 that were received, so a 37% hit score, which is not so great. You heard the team asking if the duck was online, so that means that they place the duck slightly out of range. So if they're not getting any signal, they'll move back until they can deploy the duck so they know they're at the edge of the range of one of these devices.
The line of sight range is probably about 400 meters on these devices. Problem is with vegetation, with other obstacles in the way that can affect their transmission range. So this device right now is just slightly out of range from the previous device.
Okay, 35 has been received.
Thank you, Bravo. We just extended our range. We were getting about 100 meters at the top by the power lines, but now that we're away from some of the interference, we're getting about 300 meter range down here.
You received number 0?
Yes, 0 received.
All right, they got it. Today is like an actual deployment. Before, we were just going along one highway, but here we're actually passing through a couple of communities where we would be wanting to provide coverage and allow people to connect with first responders. All right, Duck 20, put down. There we go. This was the biggest test we've ever done. We had cliffs, we had jungle, we had beach.
We wanted to get a 1 to 2 square mile field test. We did that today. The ITDRC set up a grandma balloon that worked amazingly. Everything seemed to fall into place today.
While I was down
deploying the ducks, Brian, he was able to see the little dots popping up on the map wherever we were going.
Having those visualizations, it didn't feel like it was this overly technical machine that could only work in a lab environment. It just looked like it was out there on its own working.
Very exciting day, hit a new milestone, looking forward to the future.
Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico.
Let's go.
You know, actually, I want to show you this one thing. Okay. I really want them to understand that this was so special for us. Oops, that's not it. And we wanted them to feel the same way. So we're going to give them these with a little award just to let them know, like, we really understand who you are and why you're here. Look at that. That's your trophy. We're just going to write on the side. And I have a book for each of them, too. It's safe to say that we wouldn't be here today without Corporate Service Corps. Having the opportunity to meet all these people is just, it's pretty freaking cool, for lack of a better way to say it.
To see this project from nothing, to see where it ended up now, it's a little bittersweet for sure. We know that we've left an impact on them. We know we've helped them to the best that we can. It's definitely emotional to see these guys go.
To me, it's been like a miracle come true. The fact that I got selected for this team, I can't imagine a better place in my life. It's incredible. I'm so grateful to be here, to give the best of who I am back to the people of Puerto Rico. This means so much to me, and I'm so grateful that I can be here.
When you are actually in the inside, you have a profound understanding of what people truly, truly go through. Until you actually see how someone is living and how technology is literally in real time changing their lives, you will never understand.
In a place like Puerto Rico, with everything that had happened after Hurricane Maria, it makes it a very ripe opportunity for new technologies to make a large-scaled impact. I would love to feel at some point that we're really maxing out what the technology can do. We're not there yet. There were a lot of question marks coming into this deployment. We've answered a bunch of them, but we've got so many bigger things as a result.
They need to think about the future. As more people think about using this frequency range, that frequency range can become more crowded, and they need to have plans and be ready to move to a different kind of radio if that does occur.
The hardest part was actually going out in the sun, deploying the whole network, but in the future it will be automated, maybe from drones, maybe from airplanes, or maybe the whole system will already be deployed in those areas even before the natural disaster strikes.
There are existing tools that do certain things better than their implementation. So instead of replacing that, the solution is to integrate with that. Open source is so important to this. Making people aware as it's actively developed, these are the bugs, these are the areas where it excels, this is where we need help to make it better.
OWL and IBM can collaborate as amazing partners and have this fantastic relationship, but at the end of the day, the team we've built has to be able to support this mission and this endeavor and continue to achieve that scaled impact. The owl's gotta fly.
All right, so we are back. I hope you enjoyed the Project Owl pilot mini doc. It was certainly just an amazing experience to be part of the team that that created that. So we had our principal photography was done by a group in out of St. Petersburg, Florida, called Revelry. Lance Cashwell was our main photographer on the shoot. We also had Liz Clipp, my colleague, who's doing a lot of the field producing work and running a lot of the interviews that you saw. And then we had a second cameraman, Andrew Lindemann, who joined us for a couple of days in Puerto Rico. And then I was shooting some footage myself. But it was one of the most memorable parts of filming that documentary is, the process of putting those ducks in the field is you you basically drive around and you hop out of the car and you place them every 200 to 400 meters. And so it was literally just driving 200 meters, hopping out of the car, hopping back in, driving 200 meters, hopping out of the car, hopping back in. And so, from a filming standpoint, that's so difficult because they're trying to move quickly and we're trying to make sure that we're following them, getting the shots and setting everything up. And, we're wanting to be artistic about everything. They're kind of like, go, go, go. And so, and at the same time, we're all trying to stay out of their way because we knew that, we weren't the main purpose of why we were down there. And, so yeah, it was just an incredible experience. And you saw some of the footage of the IBM Corporate Service Corps in that. And one of the great things about winning the competition, the Call for Code competition, is not only do you get the $200,000 grand prize, which is amazing, you get the prestige of knowing that you've created something that can be truly life-saving, but you also get the support of that the IBM Code and Response Initiative, and you get the support of this entire organization to really put their might behind your solution and take it to the next level. I think you saw a lot of the ways that the IBMers were working hand in hand with Project OWL, and it's invaluable experience. They scaled from a staff of 5 to a staff of 11, right off the bat like that. Yes, with all the support that IBM was able to provide there. And I'd see a question coming in about what my favorite part of filming in Puerto Rico was. I hesitate to say the food because that's so non-work related and it had so little to do with what we were actually filming down there. But if you ever get a chance to go to Puerto Rico, it is just an amazing country, an amazing Commonwealth and part of the U.S. Obviously, it is just such an amazing place to go and meet some of the most amazing people. Through this Call for Code journey, I think one of the most incredible parts about being able to do these types of projects in places like Puerto Rico are the people that you get to meet. And we were down for a hackathon in August of last year, and just we ran a hackathon at this co-working space called Engine 4, which you saw a lot of footage shot at Engine 4 as part of the documentary. But one of the most incredible things was just every single developer that took part in that hackathon that we talked to had a personal story about why they were participating and how their personal experience with the hurricane led them to, with Hurricane Maria, which hit in 2017, was really, they wanted to give back. They wanted to use their skills, bring their skills to bear to help the island and to help the people there. And that spirit and that kind of mentality is just pervasive with everybody that we met. So to answer the question, favorite part of filming in Puerto Rico, the people who were just awesome, really rallied behind this project and have rallied behind the developer community there. And then the food. So the mofongo, clearly amazing. And then, there's the giant pork thing that I get. Oh my goodness. I can't wait to go back. And I think we are going back. I think Project OWL is going to be back there. And they also just did a smaller scale, but still really interesting field test in Houston a couple weeks ago. And we had a camera person following them there. So I'll drop that in the chat. And what I think the big takeaway from Houston is just that, this project continues to grow. It continues to evolve. And it's really exciting to see. So our goal and our kind of the charge that we've put on ourselves as a content team is to say, hey, we want to follow Project OWL at every major step through their journey. And, as they continue to kind of gain more momentum and more opportunities, we want to be there to make sure that we're documenting that and showing the good work that they're doing, because it really is, at the end of the day, this, like I said in my intro, this is a startup story. It's a story of 5 people who a couple years ago, either didn't know each other or were acquaintances or whatever. And now now they want to make this their profession and their life's work. And I think that's really admirable. And I think, that's the potential that exists in Call for Code is, it's not just a coding competition. At its core, sure, it is a coding competition, but it has the potential to be so much more than this. We've seen how Call for Code changed the lives of the Project Owl team, and I think we're all hoping and banking on the fact that whoever wins this year's competition will bring that same passion. So I've got another question. Why do you think the Project Owl team has been successful? This is from Liz Clip, who wasn't able to join the live stream, unfortunately, but was integral in the entire storyline of this. So what do you think has made why do you think that the Project Owl team has been successful, and what can other Call for Code teams learn from them? The Project Owl team has been so successful because they bring their passion with everything that they do, and they're passionate about saving lives. They're passionate about building technology, and they all have complementary skills. And I think when you're looking at your teams and building your teams, what you can learn from Project Owl is that bring a multidisciplinary team to bear, and make sure that you have the right skills. You get 5 people per team, and there's a lot of great skill sets that you can bake into that 5-person team. Just kind of the way that Owl did. So they have someone who's on software, someone who's on hardware, someone who's kind of a more big picture visionary, someone who's really focused on the logistics piece of it. So they really, Brian Knaus, who's the CEO and kind of one of the catalysts of the team, really did a great job in that. So I see that my time is up, so I'm going to hand it back to the production team. But thank you so much for watching the Call for Code documentary. We dropped some links in the chat, and good luck in your Call for Code journey. Thanks a lot.
Hey, so before we get started here, I would love to do this as more of a question and answer session. So if anyone has any questions along the way, go ahead and pop those into the chat and I will get to them in a couple of minutes. Today, I'm going to be talking about DevOps for hackathons. Now, I've already done an hour-long segment on this when we do our tech talks, but if you haven't seen that yet, I'm going to do a quick run through of what we talk about there. And then if you want more details on it, go ahead and check that out. Now to find that, what we'll do is we'll go and we'll use your search engine of choice and search for IBM Tech Talk DevOps. And if we check out in here, we've got two things. We've got the DevOps for Hackathons link right here that'll come up. That'll give you an overview of it. But if we go on YouTube and search for it, we should find right here the DevOps for Hackathons one, and you can play that and watch it. It's about, 50 minutes or so. So set aside a little bit of time to do it, but there's some really good detail in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how setting up a basic DevOps pipeline can help make you more efficient in not just Call for Code, but any hackathon that you do. So let's see how we can do that. When you have a limited amount of time, being as efficient as possible is key. So what I do is I go at the very beginning straight to, read my fingerprint, straight to cloud.ibm.com. And once I'm logged in here, I come over to the little hamburger icon, I've been told it looks like, and I come down to DevOps. And you can see when this loads, I've already got a couple tool chains because I use this pretty heavily. We're going to ignore that for right now and just say create a tool chain. And we're going to go with develop a Cloud Foundry app. Now, the reason I'm using Cloud Foundry for this is because it's really fast and easy to prototype things and to get it up. If I'm working in production, personally, I'm a Kubernetes person. That's my preferred platform to use. But Cloud Foundry is really good for prototyping and getting apps up fast. So let's say create here. And we'll notice up at the top that it's going to create a couple things for us. It's going to first create a repository in IBM's hosted GitLab, and that'll have an issue tracker set up with it. It's also going to create Orion for us, which is basically a port of Eclipse into a web browser. So we'll have a full IDE there and ready for us. And we can do all the normal things that you can do in an IDE. We can write code. We can work with the with Git in there, so we can set up our pulls and pushes. We can do all of that right from there. And then once we put a change in, it's going to run through our pipeline, which we'll take a look at in a minute. That's basically going to build our app, run any checks that we tell it to do, and then set up the deploy. And the deploy is going to go to IBM Cloud. Now, I'm using IBM Cloud here because it's free, it's fast, and it's easy. You could do this with any other cloud that you want. It would work with Azure, with AWS, with anything that you want. But IBM Cloud is free, quick, and easy. So that's the one that I use. Now the toolchain name, I like to do something a little bit more obvious. Let's call this one something like live stream. And I'm going to leave it in Dallas because, well, I'm in Austin, Texas, and Dallas is the closest data center to me. But if there's another one that's closer to you, say you're in the East Coast of the US, Washington, D.C. is right there for you also. And I'm going to leave this in my default resource group. Now for Git, if you have an existing repo that you're using, you can switch repository type to existing, or you can create a fork or create just a brand new one. Since I'm trying to get off the ground as fast as possible, I'm going to go ahead and say clone. And the source URL is going to be this one here. It's just the basic Hello World Node app. And we're going to say, make this repository not private. We're going to do public because I am an open source fanatic. And we are going to enable issues and track deployment of code. Those are going to be important. Our IDE, you'll see we don't have any options for it because it'll just do everything for us. But here, don't use that because it's not going to work. We need to say create a new API key. There we go. So it created that, and now it should pull up the region, organization, and space on its own. Oh, we don't want to go into site reliability. We're going to go into Eventing Monkey. Eventing Monkey is my old handle. That's the one that I still use on IRC. So a lot of my stuff says Eventing Monkey all over it. Most places nowadays I use Roaming Matt though. So if you try to find me on anything, it's probably Roaming Matt. And we'll go ahead and say create. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click here on Get Live Stream, which will take me over to, I need to move this little thing that tells me that I'm talking. I'm going to come up here and say sign in. There we go. So now it shows my picture and I'm in here and everything's good. And this is in the GitLab interface. And we can see that this is still just the basic Node Hello World app. If we take a look at app.js, we'll see just exactly that. It's the same regular basic one that most people use. And we've got this manifest.yaml already populated. This is for Cloud Foundry. And now, oops, let's go back to cloud.ibm.com. And let's come down here to DevOps. And we're looking for live stream. So everything is set up now. So we'll take a look at our delivery pipeline. And if it's not already finished running, okay, cool. It's still running. That'll be done in just a moment. And once it's finished, there'll be a little button over here that'll let me look at it. And then I can go and double check that my app is up. But that's pretty much it for getting the basics of a pipeline in place. And this is what I do for absolutely every hackathon that I'm in. I start by doing this. And then since I'm the DevOps guy, I usually go through and build some basic CI testing in so that I can help make sure, like a linter, to make sure that there's no easy mistakes making it into our code base that might cause us an issue. And if I have time, I'll try and get my colleagues to write unit tests for their code. And then I'll put in a quick testing suite for that too. I usually can't talk people into unit testing during a hackathon, which admittedly makes sense because you're trying to crank out code as fast as you can. But at least a linter can help catch a lot of issues. And then now we can see that it's up and running. And if we say visit app URL, ta-da, here's our Hello World page. So everything looks good with that. And we are ready to get coding and to get this all up and doing the rest of the work for our hackathon. So let's take a look in the chat and see. Okay, cool. So what's the easiest way to add a testing stage? Great question. So there are two different ways that you can do that. The first is you can either come straight here into DevOps or into the delivery pipeline, since we've already done it. And we can say add stage. And we'll say input job is going to be our, actually, you know what? We don't even need to do that. We're going to go back. And we're going to just edit our build stage. And we're going to say configure this stage. And now in here, we can say, shell script. And now since this is Node, I would just say like install JSLint, or I would put that into my, my packages.json, and then in here, either run it manually from the shell script, or I could do in npm test, and I could set that up to run it. Another way that you could do that is if we go back up here to tool chains, if you know that you're going to do that and put in testing, you can come to create a tool chain. And if we come over here, there's one that says develop and test microservices with Cloud Foundry. So if we say create on this one, actually, you know what? That's not the one that I wanted at all. Well, we're going to use this one anyway. Let's see what happens. So I'm going to call this one live stream 2. And here we've got insights. So we'll say create that API key. We don't need to do anything in here for GitLab. That's all set. Orion, we don't need to do anything. PagerDuty, we're going to ignore for right now. Delivery pipeline, we're going to say create. And we don't want this to be in site reliability. We want this to be in eventing monkey. And that should come back up with test there. Looks good. Create. All right, so that's all created. Let's take a look in here at what we get with this. Cool, so now we get this build stage, which I'm willing to bet is still just a basic build, but let's take a look at our logs and see what it's running. All right. So it's still installing stuff there. That passed. Aha. This failed. So let's take a look in staging and see what happened. Okay, so let's just rerun this stage and see if it goes through. So I've never run this one before, so it's kind of exciting to see what happens live. But ideally in here, if I understand correctly, this is going to run a build and test stage. Yeah, there we go, test. Okay, looks good. And then in the staging one, it should be deploying it into a staging environment and then running some quick tests with Sauce Labs, which I don't have set up right now. So that may or may not do anything. And then for production, it looks like it has a gate and then a blue-green deploy. So that's one easy way to get that up. Or of course, like I said a moment ago, you can with Node set it up with JSLint. And let's see, it looks like Timro TW asked if we could get notifications out to Slack from things happening in a toolchain. Yes, absolutely. In fact, this one here has Slack built into it. I just didn't configure it. So if we come over to here, we can configure Slack and have it do that. And that'll let us know when anything is happening. And actually in there, you can configure it for what it's going to tell you too. So cool. Now I love that for working in production especially. But if you are, yeah, it is cool. But if you're working on a hackathon, I typically will skip over that. Let's see. And it looks like I'm going to butcher that name. So I'm going to call you Morgan. Said, can you please just show again where to write the first lines? I can't seem to find it. First lines of what? Or I can go back from the beginning. If we start at IBM Cloud, the way that I went through is I click on the hamburger, and then I come down to DevOps. And then let's see, start the first program. Oh, so like after it's already been deployed, if we come into the live stream one and go to delivery pipeline, right here, we'll see last execution result, live stream, and it says view console. And then from here, we can say visit app URL. And I know that this is called live-stream.mybluemix.net because I named my app live stream. So that's easy to find that way too. But if by chance you meant the get that created, we go to DevOps, create a tool chain, and the one that I usually use is develop a Cloud Foundry app. That's the one that I use during hackathons, and from there it walks you through all the steps to do it. Yeah, no worries. Does anyone have any other questions for me? Cool. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's say if you haven't already checked it out, definitely pull up the IBM Tech Talk on DevOps for hackathons and watch that YouTube video. I go into a lot more detail and I answer a couple questions during it. Some of the ones that come up are things like, how do I do this with Cloud Foundry instead? And I show the same easy way to go through and get it set up with a template. You can, of course, also create your own and go through and build it. When I'm working in production, I typically create my own, and that's just because it gives me a little bit more power over it, and I can start with code that I already have working. Thank you so much. So there is a link to the talk. Now, I think that link might take you to the overview page. Let me take a look. Let's see what happens when I click this, visit event site. Yeah, so this is the overview page where I talk it up some and where there's some information on it. I will pull up that YouTube link real quick, youtube.com, and I'll post that into the chat too. There may be a way to get to it from that page, but I don't know what it is. DevOps for hackathons. DevOps for hackathons. Don't you talk. And copy. Whoops. Oh, you know what? I can't send that in there, but what I can do is send it over to the host and have them put it in there. But since I'm not on Twitch, I can't do that. Can you show an example application for the call for code? There we go. Yes, so there's the YouTube video right there that you can watch. So I don't know if there's one that I can get through in the, it looks like 4 minutes that I have left, because I don't have one ready for it. But if you start with the example that I did, you can run through and create any code that you're doing after that. Or if you're already working on the code while you're setting up your DevOps pipeline, you can also tell it to just use it right away. And either way, that same manifest.yaml should work for you. It's just an absolute bare bones one. There's nothing complicated in it. There may be, let's take a quick look and see if there's anything else that stands out to me as being good. So I would definitely use Cloud Foundry for it. And let's see. Develop and test, DevOps Insights. I really like DevOps Insights, but you don't really need it for hackathons. Develop a Cloud Foundry app. Yeah, I would probably take the code that you're already writing and roll with that. Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Alejandro. Are there any last minute questions before I pop off? I guess not. Well, thank you all so very, very much for having me, and have fun and write good code.
Hi, everybody. I'm Greg Gorman. Thanks for dialing in. I thought I'd jump in and talk a little bit today about Node-RED, and I'm really happy that you're looking at and considering participating in Call for Code. Pretty exciting stuff, and lots of fun for anybody that wants to really geek out on this stuff and mess around and do fun stuff. It's all kind of cool, and I appreciate your time and your talent for coming in and doing this. Today, I want to talk about Node-RED. So what I'm going to do is give you a kind of a tool to help perhaps with some quick prototyping and even get near production type applications. So that way your submittal can be a little bit more competitive, so to speak. So we'll do that. Quick explanation over my shoulder here just for fun. Got a couple of Lego projects that just finished for NASA 50. So I thought it was kind of fun. So I've already knocked the Saturn V over once today. So it's only gonna be up there for a little while longer, and then I'm gonna go put it back on the shelf because it explodes into a zillion pieces when it falls over. Okay, so let's talk about Node-RED. So Node-RED is an application that's built on top of Node.js. It will run anywhere that Node.js runs. It's a pretty neat little a visual programming tool, and I know previous sessions, some of the people talked a little bit about it. I'm not going to give you the whole history or anything like that. It's an open source project. You go to nodered.org to find out all there is to know about it. You can also do an install on IBM Cloud and run things there. It gives you full access and lots of really neat things and easy to connect into Watson services and to build dashboards and a lot of things like that. Okay, so some of you that know me know that I'm a boater, and I like to try and go to the lake every weekend when I can and try and enjoy what time I can away from the office out on the water. So a few weeks ago, I decided to build a lake monitor. I was always like, well, I'd like to know what the conditions are out there before I load up the truck and head that way. And also that the lake levels have been running really, really high, and just trying to keep, just to try and learn a little bit about it. So of course, I built a Node-RED application to go monitor the lake. And here in the U.S., there is a data source, or there's a government agency called the U.S. Geological Survey, and they maintain a lot of water resources around the United States as part of their function. And there's a lot of automated reporting stations that they have. And being a government agency, for almost all the data, I think all of it is free to access, and there's a lot of historical data that you can get as well. I'm not going to worry about that part yet. I just wanted to show kind of some, you might say, quote unquote, real-time dashboarding and monitoring, just to give you some tips and tricks, because there's a few things I did to make this dashboard work that you might find interesting, even if you're a relatively experienced Node-RED user. I tried to put a couple tricks in here that perhaps would even impress my colleague John Wallachy, who's going to be on after me. So hopefully we'll do that. So what I did is I built this, added another dashboard basically to a big complex dashboard I've built for my house, and maybe we'll save that for a subject for another day. But this instance of Node-RED is actually running on a Raspberry Pi, sitting over the other side of my office. They're just laying on the shelf. So it's connected in my house network, which gives it internet access. And then I can do some work on it. But basically, what I'm showing right here is a bunch of data I'm getting off of Louisville Lake. It's over here in Dallas, just down the road a little bit. And I'm pulling a bunch of data. So you can see I've created some gauges and dials around current wind speed, wind direction, the lake level, which is probably the most important for me. That's the one I like to see. And then a little thing here that shows over the past 15 minutes, basically between two readings, is it going up, is it unchanged, or going down? And I may, to be honest, I might change that because the lake level doesn't change that fast. So it's almost always shows unchanged when the actual trend is down. So I may play with that a little bit more. There's also some more data that comes from it. It's got obviously a large earthen dam across the front of the lake with some gates on it. They're the big gates that kind of open like this, and they actually will transmit the amount of I don't know what you call it, whatever, however many feet the gates are open. And then I also go grab downstream of the dam is the Trinity River. So the very next flow rate meter. I found that also using the USGS data, and I go grab that data. So the cubic feet per second of the flow rate just below the dam. So I thought that would be also something kind of fun and interesting to look at. I also chart the lake level itself, so you can see, it kind of has been wobbling up and down a little bit. And then a few days ago, I got this really bright idea. I'm like, I should start plotting a line on there that shows top of pools. So anything above 522 feet is flood level for the lake. So you can see that it's still above flood quite a bit. If top of pool is 522, it's sitting at 526. So it's almost 5 feet above normal out here because of all the rain we've had in the area. And then there's also a rain gauge at the dam. And so I'm plotting the amount of rain that it measures every 15 minutes or so. I had originally started at 1 hour and decided, I didn't want to put, obviously I was trying to be a good citizen, didn't want to put too much load on the servers on the government side, because I figured eventually they'd start blocking me if I came after them too fast. And then I tried 30 minutes, and that was pretty good, except that some of the storms that we get here in Texas, 30 minutes, the storm's already blown through and you've missed all the data. So now I've tried 15 minutes, and we'll see how that goes. Just kind of keep experimenting. And that's really the neat thing about Node-RED, is that it lets you do these really quick experiments and quick changes. And it just makes it, I think, a lot of fun. Of course, like I said, a guy with Lego rockets over his shoulder nerds out on this kind of stuff, then what kind of guy I am, I suppose. So let's take a look at the Node-RED flow on this. I apologize. I know some of my friends are very particular about making sure everything's all lined up and square. You should see my desk. This is about as neat as it's going to get for a while, because I keep playing around with it and doing different things. So I'm going to step through this and explain to you what I'm doing in each of these steps in here. It's not that complicated of a flow, but there's a couple of tricks that I want to explain why I did it and why it's useful. And I think that's probably the most important thing. So first is all of these blue nodes here. These are injection nodes. Typically, this is how you might start off flow processing. So the flow is always left to right, and it follows the lines on the chart. So all four of these things can fire all at the same time, which they do when you restart Node-RED or do something. They'll all fire off. But for the most part, I just want to talk about the main flow, which is this one right here. So this is a trigger that fires every 15 minutes. So this is how I get my 15-minute data intervals. And then I go over to the USGS, and this is kind of interesting because they basically have a REST interface to their water data. And there's a test tool you can use. It'll help you build up the query and all that sort of stuff. You can go to that waterservices.usgs.gov and learn a lot about it. And there's a lot of really neat things there. And basically, that's what all this stuff does. There's a site ID that you want to use. And then you can also query what pieces of data do you want. And I said, just give me everything you got. And so it returns back a big JSON object. And I'll show you that. So if I turn on this green item here, that's called a debug node. And we'll just fire that trigger. So it's going to go through. You can see it requesting the data. It takes a little bit. It takes them 3 or 4 seconds to respond. And then I get back a data packet from the USGS. And it looks like this. It's a fairly big one. In here in value, there's this thing called time series. And this is where all the data is. And you just keep expanding it out. It tells you. So there's the wind speed object. Here's the, this is wind direction. So you can see they're all piled up in this array. This is a JSON array, right, in this time series. So first step is then, well, how in the heck do I process an array? Well, there's 2 ways you can do it. One, obviously, traditionally we were taught to process arrays in a loop, right? And you go loop for 0 to 3, and do each one in a sequence. Well, I decided I don't want to do that. I'm going to try and use Node-RED the way it was intended. And they have this really spiffy little node here called split. And a split node will take an array and break it up and make each piece of the array, however you tell it to split it, into its own separate message. So basically I get one message from the USGS and I sequence it into 4. So it goes blam, 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 blam with each of those 4 objects. So that makes it kind of easy down the line here to process, and I'll show you why. There's also a node here called the change node. And this is really useful too, because basically you can move stuff around inside a message, or you can drop stuff out, or you can overwrite things. You can add things to a message. A pretty useful node. I use it a lot in a lot of different places, and I'll show you as we go. So basically, when I get that big honking piece of data in from the USGS, all I really want is that time series piece. So when I'm there, I just want to strip off this section of the flow, and then I want to split it into 4 messages. So that's a quick and easy way, instead of writing a loop and risking, you might say, an infinite loop, or if they add more data, if the dam or the USGS decides they're going to add another instrument or another reading, then I don't have to change this code at all. It'll just make 5 messages or 6 messages or 7 messages, and it'll just keep blasting them at me to process downstream. So I think that's pretty useful, at least I think it is, and makes it a little bit more flexible as far as the way the code goes. Okay, so then I just used a quick on-page connector just for cleanliness, but basically then after we blasted into 4 messages, so now you're thinking this is 4x down here. So I put a switch statement in here, and this one I hard-coded. Basically, if you look at each of these objects, they have a code. So you can say, look, variable code 0 value. So I kind of hard-coded it in there, but basically it's this 0035, then that's the wind speed. So that's just for me a way to determine which message of those 4 am I looking at the time. So then it just drops off at each of these outputs. So I basically now determine what kind of message am I looking at, because if they change the order that they're in, or like I said, or they add more at the end, this way it always works no matter what. As long as I use the same code, which is common across all of their data, then I'll always get the wind speed no matter where it shows up in that array. That's the idea. And then here's another change node. Basically, I'm just changing message payload to be the value. So I just go down there and I grab the wind speed value somewhere in here. There it is, values 0, value 0. It's kind of buried way down in there, but it's currently 2.3 miles an hour. So what I'm doing is taking that really low chunk of data and just writing it at the top of the message. And the reason I have to do that is because then the next thing in line is a dashboard gauge for the wind speed. And this little guy primarily expects that data value to be message.payload. It expects it to be kind of the top value on the payload. And so I put in a little gauge that makes it's the one that goes like a half moon. You can put whatever min-max values you want in there, and you can even have it change the color. So like if I wanted it, because it's 0 to 20 is green, and maybe 50 to 100 is red or something, and 100 is a little bit outrageous, but I thought, what the heck, in case we have a tornado down there, I want to at least get it before the anemometer breaks off. So that little string, if I switch back here, creates the wind speed gauge right there. Okay. So that's pretty straightforward, not a really big deal. Do the same thing with wind direction. With that, you use the gauge, but instead I put it on compass mode. So there's a couple different ways you can format that gauge or that particular widget. And so that one's a compass. So that gives you wind direction and pretty much magically shows up. Okay. Next one is, let's go down here and look at lake level. So there's 2 pieces to this one. So the first one obviously is a gauge that shows the lake depth. And what I did here is looked up the data for the lake and said, all right, what is the dead pool, they call it, which is the bottom level of the lake where they can't do anything, and it would never ever get past that level, I suppose. So I said 481 is the lowest the lake will ever get. 532 is the top of the emergency spillway. So it'll never get any higher than 532 because then it'll start going over the emergency spillway. And then I broke it up into yellow, green, and red sections, just so that way you could say, if it's 522 and above, that means it's in flood stage. 512 to 522 is in the green range, and that's normal. And 481 to 512 is way below normal. So that's kind of the way I have it color coding the gauge. So so that's why when you look at the lake level gauge, it's bright red because it's above 522. So that's why that one is doing that. Then next, I feed that same value of lake level into a history. So this is a chart. And you can set up these line charts a lot of different ways. And here I said, I want to store 4 weeks worth of data or 10,000 points. I'm just trying to be, why not? Let's be let's be greedy and store it all. And this way I can see the lake trend at least over the past month. And I think that would be pretty useful as well. And I don't do a whole lot of other fancy stuff with it. I just kind of do, just display it. So that gets you then, as it collects data, it puts it on the chart like that so you can see it. Now, here's the next trick, and I learned this just a few days ago. Everybody else that already knows this can laugh at me, but the charts don't store their history. And we've been having such bad storms here in Dallas. My power's been going out every couple of days, it seems like, with windstorms and lightning storms and hailstorms and all kinds of craziness that we've had here. And every time the power cycles, then you lose the data in the chart because it's basically just storing that strip in memory. So the chart node itself has an output, and the idea there is you can connect it to, in my case, since it's running on a Pi, I can just store it in a file. If you're running over on IBM Cloud, you would store it in a cloud database or somewhere else, and then just have it overwrite every time. So here, I'm just writing it to a file on the Raspberry Pi's memory disk, and I just overwrite it every time. Every time this gets updated, it just writes a new copy of the file, is all it does. That way, I've got now an on-disk image of all of the data in the chart. Now, this takes us back up to the starting area here. So whenever the Raspberry Pi reboots, or you have to restart Node-RED, or something else happens and Node-RED itself restarts, you can also do a trigger that says, I only want to run it once on startup. So I said, wait 1/10 of a second and then send a trigger. And what I'm doing here is 1/10 of a second after the after Node-RED starts up this flow, this trigger will fire. And basically I'm just saying, go grab the lake history file, convert it to a JSON, and then send it back to the chart. So that way it fills the chart back up with all of the previous history. So that way then my chart comes back relatively close to where it was. So you can see this chart's been running a couple weeks, I suppose. I probably need to change the bottom here so it shows the day or the date number or whatever, day number. But it's been running now a couple weeks, and all through here, I've probably had 3 power hits here at the house. So it's still got data from several weeks ago. So that's good confirmation that it works. And so that's a really neat trick to store that. So I also did it with the rain value here. So you can see I also load the rain history. And I thought those were pretty slick. So those kind of things I thought were interesting to do. Okay, so now I have 8 minutes left. A couple things I want to show here as well, which is to final out, and this is where another couple little tricks come in. So on the change, so this little widget right here. The idea is I want to compare 2 measurements, so previous measurement and current measurement, you might say, and show me, and then I want to decide if it's gone up, stayed neutral, or gone down, right? So there's a pretty slick little node. It's a join node, and it basically says, what I want you to do is save 2 messages and send me an array of 2 messages. So every 2 messages that it picks up, it glues them together and sends them to me in an array. So it's kind of the opposite of the node I used up above, which was take an array and split it apart. So this is taking array, or taking messages and sticking together into an array. So then that gives me an array of 2 measurements in a row. And then I use the change node again. But here, instead of just a simple change, I'm using a little chunk of code. It's called JSonata that you can put in there. And it basically is the good old, really obtuse, if you're a C programmer, you love them, little logical if statements, basically. So it's take the current measurement, subtract the previous measurement, and is it greater than 0? If it is, you return a 1. Otherwise, subtract them again. Is it less than 0? Return a -1. Otherwise, return a 0. So this is, for all you C programmers out there, you all ought to be jumping for joy right now. That's probably one of my favorite statements in C. So basically, all I'm doing is determining the slope of the line and returning either a 1, a 0, or a -1. Okay. And then I use a switch statement that says, okay, I'm going to look at the slope because I want to process a little bit differently here. And there's probably better ways to do this. I just thought I'd try some JSON and do some fun things in there because I thought it'd be really helpful. And then I use the change node again, because what I'm going to do is mess around with, here, let me start here first. So to actually show the up, the down, or the flat, I'm using a button node. So this is actually a dashboard widget that normally you would use as a push button in Node-RED, but instead I'm just using it as a display or a mode type thing, you might say. And what I'm doing is, sure, it is, and I was going to show that at the very end. If you look on GitHub, and I'll go ahead and jump to that right now. If you go to GW Gorman on GitHub under flows, it is right there. So it's the JSON for this particular flow. So I do have it published there. So sorry, and we diverge. And so what I've done is you can adjust bits and parts of some of these dashboard nodes by sending them in the message. So the payload, the color, and the background. A little shout out to our colonialists here by using the OUR version of color. But at least that way, I can now change the background, the color, and the label of that button. Okay, so the button is this piece right here. So background, the color, and the label are things that I can change. So that's what I do in this change node. I'm setting up, I want the background red, I want the payload to be the word up, and then I can also send in a material design icon for up, flat, or down. So I did that as well. And then set the text to be white, so that way you can read it, is what the message of color white is. That changes the text color to white. So white text, red background. And then if you look at this one, it's yellow background, black text with the material icon flat and the words UNCH, right? So that's what's there right now, right? Pretty slick. You guys getting it? Then this one is green. The payload is the trending down. Okay, so I'm using good is the lake's going down, red is the lake's going up, basically. And then black text on a green background. So that's kind of the way I have those set up. So that gives you a quick piece on how that works. Okay. And really, that's about it. I just thought that would be fun. Also at startup, I run to get 2 measurements in a row, so I don't get on the button, I don't get invalid data. I send a second measurement at startup right away, like after 30 seconds. So it does the first measurement, then it waits 30 seconds and sends another one in. So that way, at least my my little button flow after 30 seconds, the slope is calculated properly. And I thought that would be good. Then I did the same thing here to calculate and grab this query right here to USGS, grabs that flow meter that's downstream from the dam, and basically just process it the same way. I throw it in there, and then the only thing that changes is right here at the switch, because that flow meter is a different code. I can grab it and show that as well. It just comes out as the discharge rate in a gauge. So I thought that would be pretty slick, kind of fun, and perhaps would give you guys some ideas on how this stuff might work. I also have a lot of other flows, and maybe we can talk about them at other times around, and you can probably see on here, you're getting some ideas. I've got smart things integrated in here. I also have Alexa in there. I'm working on Blink. I've got an MQTT server in the house, so I've got a bunch of data that flies across that, and a whole bunch of other information that I've been collecting around the house that I can display and do all kinds of fun and games with. But for sure, take a look at the Louisville Lake flows and see if you can use any of that stuff. I just thought it was interesting. Oh, one final thing. As I started playing with this, you can see just a few days ago, I'm like, well, if top of pool is 522, why don't I have the chart draw a line at 522? I couldn't figure out any other way to do it other than every time a measurement comes in, I just set data at 522. And when you send the chart a different topic, it starts drawing a different line. So basically now the chart is plotting, the standard message and another one with a different topic on it. So one of them is the live data, and the other one is always 522. So that gets you a chart with 2 lines on it. So another way, hopefully that gives you some inspiration or some ideas. All right, I'm at 11:29. Mia, is there any other questions? All right. Great. Great talking to y'all, and have a great day. We'll see you soon.
Hello, this is John Wallachy. Really delighted that I'm going to be here with you for the next 30 minutes. Following on to what Greg had really introduced us to with Node-RED, I'm going to build a similar or another Node-RED flow that solves a particular problem that many hackathon projects face. And I just want to show you how to jumpstart that. I think you'll find very useful scenarios where it can help you with your application if you decide to build a Node-RED application that has a visual recognition use case. This is going to really be a great way to get started. So I originally wrote a code pattern and a tutorial about surveying flooded neighborhoods to identify survivors on rooftops, detect rescue boats, and guide you from the rescue boat to the survivors. And that's a fun little tutorial up on IBM Developer. And you start with Watson Studio and you upload, and instructions are pretty clear. In about 30 minutes, you can train a Watson visual recognition custom classifier to detect rescue boats and rooftop survivors in a flooded neighborhood. And I show you how to use Watson Studio. I give you the zip files, and there's a little bit of drag and drop, and you're up and running pretty quickly. So that was all fun, just Watson Studio, IBM Cloud, and the Watson Visual Recognition Service. I went to a recent hackathon, and the team said, no, that's great, but we want to use Node-RED to validate the test data, to actually build an application around the model that I had just built. And so they started down their journey of learning Node-RED. How do you build a web form, right? Because they wanted to have a web app where you could, so their case was their lost dog and a call for code. After a natural disaster, we really care about not only the people and the humans, but their pets. And they wanted to connect their pets to, a lost pet. How do you train on a lost pet? And so they wanted to upload photos of a lost pet to a website, and you would train a visual recognition model, and then they would ask people to look for their dog or their cat, or their pig or horse or duck or whatever favorite pet animal they might have, and then train. So once you uploaded a photo, is this your dog? I saw it running down Maple Street. Then you could actually match, right, the photo and the class. So they struggled with building a web form and an application, and then building a custom classifier. And so I helped them a little bit best I could and all of the other teams. And I went back home and said, well, sounds like such a great idea. Let me go build that and actually put that as an exemplar out for you all to use as a jumpstart. And I recently uploaded so Greg didn't mention, as part of the Node-RED .org website, is there's a section of the site called Flows. And this is where you can go and learn about other nodes to extend your palette, but you also can find examples of flows that other people have built. And so I uploaded one. I called it the Watson Visual Recognition Custom Classifier Flow. And so there's over 3,000 different nodes and flows out and available for you to go and learn and experiment with and incorporate into your application. And so I uploaded some instructions and a zip file, and I show you how to do it. And that's what we're going to spend the next 25 minutes talking about, how to build, and we'll walk through some of the Node-RED flow like Greg did, and I'll show you some techniques that I used to build a form, because at the end, and I purposely didn't make this fancy, right? I wasn't trying to build a fancy web form and application because that's what you should do. I just want to give you the example that you can build on top of. And so we're going to dive into this flow. We'll take a look at the form itself that gets prompted. So the form, it asks for three things. So what do you need when you build a Watson Visual Recognition custom classifier? You need to give it a name, and you need to give it a positive set and a negative set. At minimum, those three things: a name, positive zip file, and a negative zip file. And the minimum number of images that you need to train with is 10. So what Watson Visual Recognition is really good at is, with very small data sets, building a custom classifier. We're not asking for 10,000 images. We just need 10. And so I have a form here that lets you pick 10 images. Now you have to go find the images of whether you're training on pets, or in my case, flooded neighborhoods, and you give it the positive and a negative. Now you could also build additional classes. My form doesn't do that, but could easily be extended to show you how to do additional classes within your custom classifier. So we're going to give it a name. We're going to upload some zip files. Actually, what we're not going to do is upload zip files. We're going to upload a bunch of images. And so we're going to go select 10 images from my hard drive, and then we'll let the Node-RED flow do the zip for us. And so we're going to zip and train, and then we want to go test it. Right? Was our model successful? So and there's two ways to test Watson Visual Recognition. You can upload an image file that was not part of your training set. All right, so good data scientists will take their data, 80% will go towards training, 20% will go into their test validation suite. And so of the 20%, we're going to upload some of those photos to see how we did. How accurate is the model that we just created? So we're going to either upload an image from our hard drive, or there's another technique where you could just give it a URL somewhere out on the internet that you can point the Watson Visual Recognition Service to. It has to be publicly accessible on the internet. And so here's a photo, here's an image, what does it see? And so you could paste a URL, or you could upload that image. So now, of course, to do this successfully, the flow, you can run local on your hard drive with your local Node-RED, or you can run it in IBM Cloud, either one. But you do need to create the Watson Visual Recognition Service instance up in IBM Cloud. And if you wanted to experiment with Watson Studio, all in the free tier, you don't need to get yourself a credit or a full account. It's all in the free tier. And I give you some links on how to do that, and then some suggestions on how to deploy Node-RED in the IBM Cloud using the starter kit. Okay. All right. So let's go. You're all curious on how we're going to build this form and take a look at some Node-RED. So let's go dive in now. So has anyone built a form with Node-RED before? Node-RED lets you create endpoints, and it's just, these are just RESTful endpoints. And so in my case, I decided that I wanted my web form to be my URL / visual recognition. And so I just grabbed from the palette an HTTP in Node. It's a get method, and I gave it a public URL / visual recognition. And so now anytime you visit the URL, I get control. And of course, you need to respond. So we are going to send an HTTP response at the end of our little flow here. So the first thing you want to do is, did the person actually submit, right? Was there a submit phase? And so we're going to, if you didn't actually hit the submit button, then we're going to continue on. And we're just going to build a very simple web page. And so in a template node, I've grabbed from the palette, I'm just, this is HTML 101, H1, horizontal rule, a paragraph, a form. Let's go take a look at the form. Now, you could obviously wrap a very pretty CSS, paste CSS here, a JavaScript. I just want to give it some very simple forms. And the first form is, we're going to call a form. It's going to be a post. We're going to upload a zip file, and it's going to be a multi-part form because we're going to select multiple files from our hard drive. And so inside of full form, you can, format it a little bit. So I've got a step one, right? Give us a name. And that step one is an input type. It's just some text. And we're going to go extract the classifier name later on. And in step two, we want it's going to be a file dialog. So it's a file type. And we're going to ask for some positive images. These are going to be, what are you training on? What is the Watson Visual Recognition Training Service? And it's going to be a multiple select box. So we know we're going to get multiple files here. Step three, at minimum, you need to give it the negative set. So what visual recognition is supposed to look for and what it's not. And so we're going to upload 10 images of both. And there's going to be a button, a submit button, that's we call zip and train. So that's the first part. So let's go see just that little bit of that. So we are looking at this first section here, right? So that's the first form. And so we're going to fill this in a moment. And then the second part of the form is, second part of our little HTML page here is two other forms. One form is is going to give us the URL. If you want to go do a check whether the trained model is going to be classified or not. And the other one is going to analyze. So let's go do this. And so, because I want to give it 15 minutes or so to train, we're going to call, and we're going to come back to the flow and we'll walk through the rest of it. But in the background, I'm going to let the Watson Visual Recognition Service build a custom model here for us. So let's go pick 10 images. I happen to have a bunch of flooded neighborhoods here, so I'm going to do Control A. And I'm going to upload these images. These are just, you know, I can jump through, and as you can see, there's a bunch of flooded neighborhoods. Of course, these were drones. I'm a drone. I love drones. So I've got some drone images of flooded neighborhoods. All right, let's go pick 21 of those. Now let's give it a negative set. So I just wanted to train it on suburban neighborhoods that are just, you know, grass and streets and houses. So I've got a bunch of these. All right, and I'm going to hit the zip and train. So somewhere in the background, cool. So we're going to go look and see what's happening here. So we created some zip files and we called the service. Let's go take a look at our flow to see what just happened there. You'll note, and I'll talk about the debug over on the right side. But what I just did is I filled in this web form and I pressed submit. So that was the post. And out of the post here, I got a bunch of files, right? Remember, I uploaded 21 images of a flooded neighborhood and 13 images of just a regular neighborhood. And I'm going to now call the visual recognition. Oops, I got to jump down here. Here we go. So we're going to, coming in, this is the upload to zip post that we just called here. And we're going to extract out of this the files. And what we got, actually, it's fun to watch over here too. So remember, 21 plus 13, 34. So I've got 34 files. Some of them were positive, some of them were negative. And there's a little bit of metadata about each one. Let's go take a look. So the first picture here, it is one of the positive ones. It had a name. It was a 7-bit encoded. It's a JPEG. There's a buffer. It's 128K. The second one was a positive. It too had a picture. We're going to go look for a negative one here, maybe towards the bottom. That was a positive. There's a negative. Okay. So we got this big array's got positives and negatives. It's got all the buffers. Now we got to sort them into the positive bucket and the negative bucket. And I wrote a little function node that's going to just loop through all of the, now if you don't give it 10, it tells you, hey, you need 10. And if you don't upload images, say you uploaded doc files or HTML or text files, it also throws an error. Hey, you need to give me an image, a MIME type of images. But if we're successfully got ourselves a chunk of photos, we're going to just loop through them, and if they're positive, we add them to a positive array, and if they're negative, we add them to a negative array. So now we've got 2 arrays of zip file buffers that images, and let's see what happens next. So we're going to use a really fun node. It's just someone in the internet contributed to Node-RED a node, and you can add the zip node to your palette. So I said, that's clever. And I looked at the help for the zip node here. Let's go take a look at that. And so what it requires, let me go select it. You need to send it a list of files or an array containing the files and the buffers. I said, that's what I got. And so I had it zip up the positive examples, and then I zip up the second set as negative examples. Now I've got 2 zip files sort of in memory up in IBM Cloud, and I go grab the name. So what name do we call it? We gave it a name, Flooded Neighborhoods. And so I set up the parameters to train our model, and I kind of tell it where to go look for it. And I call visual recognition utility to go create a classifier. And so you can, since we're just creating one now, we could also retrain. We can get a list of classifiers. We can update a classifier. We delete them, etc. We're going to go create a new one here, and then we got back what did we get back? This might still be in my buffer here. So down below, it said, hey, we're gonna start training. So you can see it's in training status right now, but we have ourselves a classifier ID, and we're gonna use the classifier ID to go test our model afterwards. And so I dropped that into a flow variable, which I'm gonna use up above. And I'm just gonna say, hey, thanks for playing. Please wait while the classifier trains. And that was the little template right there. Just says, please wait while our classifier with the ID trains. And we've got that now in our memory, because we're going to use it up above here, because we want to go test it later. Remember, we have in our form, I'm going to hit the back button. We can go give ourselves a test image. Before I go test, let's go jump into our test data here. And yeah, so that's a flooded neighborhood, right? So we're going to give it an image. And I'm going to click on the Analyze File button in a moment. What's going to happen there is we're going to upload the picture. We're going to check our custom classifier. And remember, we stored it in memory in our flow variable. So we're just going to go grab that custom classifier, prepare ourselves for this, to not only on the default classifier that Watson knows 12,000 objects, we're also going to have him check with our flooded neighborhood class. And so we build ourselves a parameter list, which we're going to send to the visual recognition service. Now, in this case, we're going to have it classify an image, and we're going to see what Watson sees. All right. That was a lot of talking about on the Node-RED side. Let's go see what's happening up on the Watson IBM Cloud side. And so prior to this, I had gone into the IBM Cloud catalog, and I jumped over to the AI category. And while we're going to talk about Watson Studio, what I really was interested in was I created an instance of the visual recognition service. It's in the light tier. It's free. You get a couple of hundred images a month that you can classify. You get 2 custom classifiers, and you can classify a couple of hundred images, 1,000 images. All right, so let's go. So I did that, and I took my app, and here I bound it to my app, so it was all, I didn't have to copy API keys around. If I had wanted to, I could have grabbed my API key and pasted it into my Node-RED flow by using the copy paste here. Now you notice there's also a way to go create a custom model right from the tool. And we're just going to go see, we're not going to go create a new classifier. We're going to go see how ours is ours is doing. And let's go see here. If I hit refresh. Let's go and let's go see if it's got it going here. It should tell me I've got one. No? I was hoping to go have it let's go list it. Yep, I got credentials for it. I was hoping to show you up and test in the cloud here. Let's go see if it's done. It should be done pretty soon. I know I'm going to run out of time. Up next at 1 o'clock Eastern, I think JJ was taking over from me. I'm not sure which. I'll tell you in a second. Oh, super cool. Web components with Kevin Hoyt. Oh man, you're gonna have so much fun with Kevin. All right, let's go see how we did. We're gonna do test our image here. All right, so it had finished training, and so here was that was the image I uploaded, and we've got this flooded neighborhood classifier, and well, that's pretty good. So that would 91% confidence score. It thought it was a flooded neighborhood. That's what I wanted it to train on. Now the default classifier thought there was some broccoli in it. Well, that's pretty fun. Well, that's true. That tree looks like some broccoli. I believe that. All right, so let's hit the back button and let's go pick another image that was not a flooded neighborhood. Let's go. That's a drone picture. Here's one of a just a neighborhood. Let's see how it did. Yeah, lower, right? Lower. It still saw some brown. It could have been, but a much lower score in this case. Now, I could also go out on the internet. If I had time, I would go search. I don't know how quickly we can do a, let's just say Midwest flooded neighborhood images. Let's jump over to, we're just going to grab one of these. I have not seen this before. Here's one. And so we're just going to do copy link, copy image location here. Oops. Yikes. That's not what I wanted. Copy link location. Let's try that. Let's go paste it into our little flow here. So now hopefully I've got that URL. Perfect. Analyze image. It was junk. Google's mangling the URL for me. Sorry. All right. I jumped. Didn't want this to be hard for you. There we go. That's what I wanted. And let's hit the back button. I wanted to show you both ways that it would work. And I'm going to Control V. And that looks like a URL now with a JPEG. Cool. So that was the picture I found on the internet, and it's with pretty high confidence has a flooded neighborhood. The default classifier saw a road, it saw a storm. So that was kind of, so our model works, right? Our flow that we just built here was pretty successful. One thing we can, let's go finish our little description here. Remember when I hit the submit button for the image or the URL, I came in the simple path, not the zip file path. It too is an HTTP in node, but in this case, it was the post from the form, that second form. And I took that, either the image or the URL, and I sent it to visual recognition, and I got back, let's go see what I got back. I got back from, oh no, I'm looking for this node here. I got back this result, and I'm going to go and show you what. So here was the behind the scenes. What Watson Visual Recognition responded with was the class and then the confidence score. And of course, I then put that into an HTML table, which I show you. So that was the response from visual recognition. I got back a whole JSON object. And in this last little function, I parsed through the classifiers and, fancy down below. I build myself a little bit of stylized HTML with a table. Somewhere here, I have an H2 and a table, and then some rows, because we've got a bunch of rows of possible classes. And so, if you're planning to build some app, maybe it's a flooding app or lost your pet, find your pet app, and you want to use Node-RED with Watson Visual Recognition, I've got an example that you can now use to go and upload those images, create that zip file, train your model, test your model. And so hope you found this useful. Feel free to ping me either in the Slack channel for Call for Code or reach me out on Twitter @JohnWallachy. Thanks, everyone.